everyone, welcome to TechstrongTV. Today is Tuesday, July 19th. I'm Natan Solomon and I'll be your host today while Alan and the Techstrong team take on JFrog's July DevOps in Israel. Today we bring you some awesome interviews as our team had conversations with some of the industry's best and brightest. I'll start by bringing you the tech headlines and diving into what's making waves around the tech world. Then, we have an interview with Alan and Karthik Krishnan from RSA. Karthik is CEO of Concentric AI, which is a company that helps enterprises discover, monitor, and protect critical data by using deep learning and natural language processing. Next, we take you to KubeCon Cloud Native Con, where Alan interviewed Ital Schwartz, the CTO and co-founder of Commodore. In this interview, Alan and Ital discuss Kubernetes at scale and what is coming next. They also talk about the story of Commodore and its most recent round of Series B funding. We also have part 2 of an episode of The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones. In this episode, Mike will be discussing the angel investor, entrepreneur, and brilliant mind known as NATO. Part 2 picks up where we left off yesterday, so be sure to tune in for that. Next, we'll be airing a special RSAC edition of CISO Talk. In episode 27, Alan and Mitch are joined by Anthony Johnson of Delve Risk, Jennifer Minell of Vision Security, and Allison Miller from Reddit. They'll discuss the evolving role of CISOs and how security strategies are also constantly changing. We then have an interview with Charlene and Loris Degiani at RSA. Loris is the CTO and co-founder of SysDig, a company that provides a full-featured security platform for modern applications. In this interview, they'll discuss the speed of cloud-native technologies and how their evolution forces modern security to also evolve. Finally, we bring you a double dose of View with Vizar to cap off the show. First, Mike talks with Cam Eshke, Chief Strategy Officer for Lightbits Labs. They go over how $42 million in additional funding will be used by the company to make high-performance storage more accessible. Mike then meets with Paul Giorgi, Director of Sales Engineering for XM Cyber, to talk about the acquisition of Cyber Observer and how it will add cybersecurity context that is otherwise lacking. That's what we have coming up for you here on TechstrongTV. Let's get the show started. Enjoy. And here are the headlines. First in news, Netflix has partnered with Microsoft for an ad-supported subscription plan. In April, Netflix announced it was planning on rolling out an ad-supported tier after years of resisting the move. Netflix has been long opposed to having commercials and other promotions on the platform, but it said during the company's earnings conference call that it makes a lot of sense to offer customers a cheaper option. In recent months, Netflix has struggled to retain and add subscribers, and this may be due to it increasing the cost of its services in the beginning of 2022. To turn the tides, Netflix is partnering with Microsoft, who will help facilitate the ad-based service. Next, in a recent report, the Cyber Safety Review Board classified the Log4j software flaw as endemic. The new cybersecurity panel created by the Biden administration said that while there hasn't been a sign of any major cyber attack due to the Log4j flaw, it will still be exploited for years to come. The board's chairman even said it is one of the most serious software vulnerabilities in history. The flaw, which was made public last year, lets internet-based attackers easily seize control of everything from industrial control systems to web servers and consumer electronics. The board also noted that the flaw will pose security risks for potentially a decade or more. In other news, Snapchat is finally coming to the web after more than a decade as a mobile app. Snap announced today that it is debuting Snapchat for web, allowing users to send messages and make video calls to their contacts from their computers. The new desktop version will at first only be available to Australian and New Zealand users, as well as to Snapchat Plus subscribers in the US, UK, and Canada. Snap recently launched Snapchat Plus, allowing users to pay $3.99 a month for a wider range of features. The desktop version of Snap will be a more stripped-down version of the mobile app, as it will mainly focus on the app's messaging feature instead of the Stories feature. Another tech giant making headlines is Amazon, who has paused work on 6 new US office buildings to weigh its hybrid work needs. Amazon planned on constructing 6 new office buildings in Bellevue and Nashville. However, it wants to make sure the building designs suit hybrid work. With remote and hybrid work becoming increasingly prevalent in today's world, Amazon is considering different layouts than traditional workflows. The announcement comes just weeks after Amazon highlighted its growth in Bellevue. It also noted that its decision to pause construction does not change its stated commitment to bringing 25,000 jobs to the east side by 2025. The news also comes at the same time as Amazon's pullback on its office expansion plans in New York City. Although Amazon is one of the industry's leaders, it's becoming evident that the macroeconomic conditions and potential recession are taking no prisoners and forcing almost everyone to dial back on their expansive plans. Next, it seems Elon Musk is in no rush to go to court against Twitter, as him and his legal team filed a motion opposing Twitter's request to fast-track a trial over his termination of the $44 billion deal. Musk's lawyers said Twitter's unjustifiable request to rush the merger case to trial in 2 months should be rejected. The legal showdown has had a number of twists and turns, with the trial yet to even begin. Originally, Musk and Twitter agreed to a merger at $54.20 per share. Then, Musk decided to terminate the deal, citing an excessive amount of spam bots as the reason. Since then, Twitter has been trying to force Musk back into the purchase through legal action. Twitter requested the trial begin in September because the merger agreement with Musk terminates on October 25th. Twitter declined to comment on Musk's motion to delay the trial, but it's clear that both sides are motivated to have their way. On DevOps.com, we have an article talking about how building secure code is needed to prevent supply chain attacks. It begins by citing the SolarWinds cyber attacks as a point of concern, and ultimately proof that the supply chain is vulnerable to severe attacks, whether from the hostile nation state like Russia or any other cybercriminal party. With this, it argues that practices like code signing and source code scanning technology is important for flagging vulnerabilities. It also talks about the need for CISOs to be proactive and constantly scanning for flaws that could be exploited. On Container Journal, we have an article talking about implementing Zero Trust on Kubernetes. It first covers the basic concepts of the Zero Trust model before then talking about the 3 best practices for Zero Trust. It then concludes that security can no longer be an afterthought when deploying and managing Kubernetes in production environments. It also argues that Zero Trust practices are effective and can secure Kubernetes projects and IT infrastructures. Finally, on Security Boulevard is an article covering a survey that suggests the Zero Trust IT transition will take time. The survey of 400 senior decision makers from mid to large-sized companies in the US and Canada found that 97% view adopting a Zero Trust model as a priority. It also showed that the primary reasons for making the shift to Zero Trust are securing remote access, improving the end-user experience, and eliminating exposure to VPN vulnerabilities. Although many want to make the shift, the article also says it's not clear the rate at which the shift to Zero Trust IT will accelerate the transition to the cloud. And that's today's headlines.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey everyone, we're back here at RSA Conference with our continuing live streaming coverage from right from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. We've had a great third day of RSA, lots of great conversations, great companies we've been able to introduce, meeting with old friends. My next guest is Karthik Krishnan. Karthik is the CEO of Concentric. Is it Concentric.ai or Concentric
It's Concentric AI.
And what's the website?
www.concentric.ai.
So it is Concentric.ai too, but it's Concentric AI.
Because the .com domain is concentricai.com.
Ah, so you have the .com too. Good stuff. Good work. All right. Karthik, welcome, first of all, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
This is the first time we're interviewing you and anyone from Concentric on Techstrong TV. So I think we should start with, if you don't mind, I'm sure there's people in our audience who don't know Concentric AI. So why don't we start with, what's Concentric AI about?
Yeah, at Concentric AI, we help enterprises discover, monitor, and protect their business critical data. Think sensitive data such as PII, PCI, business confidential, financial information, intellectual property, sitting across an enterprise environment between on premises and cloud repositories like Office 365, Google Drive, and so on.
Absolutely. We're going to jump more into that in a moment, but you are the CEO. Share a little bit of your background maybe with our audience.
Sure. I've been in the security industry for close to 20 years now, from running security products at Juniper Networks to data encryption at PGP Corporation through the
Sure.
acquisition to Symantec. And then before this was part of a behavioral analytics startup called Niara, which got acquired by HPE.
Okay.
And the genesis for Concentric was a conversation I had with a chief information security officer back in 2018, when he was asking me, hey, are you guys doing anything in data security? Because if I were to have a data security audit, I'm likely to get fined. I don't know where all my mission critical data is, much less where the risk is to my information. And interestingly, he was mentioning to me, I'm spending $3 on people for every dollar in tool, and yet I'm getting extremely underwhelming results. And so,
Well, it's hard to scale that because it's an expensive proposition, right? So let's talk a little bit about it, though. There's mission critical data, but mission critical data covers a lot of sins, right? There's mission critical data in that the data is critical to the functioning of our company. It's the crown jewels. It's the IP of our company. Then there's other types of mission critical data that I tend to call it sensitive data, right? HIPAA data, PII data, PCI data, GDPR, whatever compliance mandate you want to be married to. But that data is also, and my experience is critical IP data, I think on the whole, companies are a little bit more careful with that than they are with some of the sensitive data. And that sensitive data is the kind of stuff that when you fail an audit, you could get put out of business, right? Let alone fined or anything. It's enough to shut you down. Here's the other thing, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on it, is there's almost like a Moore's law here, where the bigger the company and the more data they have, the more likely they are not to have a really good handle on where this data is, where it resides, what its permissions are, etc. Is that kind of for you, that's good because that makes for a lot of big customers, but is that the truth?
yeah, I think there's quite a bit of truth to that. What we see enterprises of a certain size, and I'm saying even if you get to about 1,000 employees, customers' consistent complaint is data volumes are growing exponentially. Data is also sprawled everywhere, both on premises and in the cloud. And as you provide end users with the ability to collaborate on data as they are creating, modifying, duplicating content, now a lot of the InfoSec teams tend to have much less of an idea of what's actually happening. And you are correct in that as the company scale grows, the environments get messier and messier.
Yeah.
And yet your data security and compliance requirements haven't changed. And so that's what's definitely a fundamental driver for companies like Concentric AI.
Absolutely. And there's another aspect that I don't know if people at home, if they think about it, it'll be obvious. Like even us, right, at TechStrong, we're a small little company, under 50 people, but between data stored on OneDrive, for those who are using Microsoft Office, we have a Gmail mail system where everyone, I think, gets 5 terabytes under our Google thing. So data stored in Google, data stored there, and that's just two. Then there's the HubSpot stuff, and we use a variety of third-party apps where we're putting data. A lot of it gets duplicated. So if I say, okay, I want to wipe out that list with those people's PII, I may wipe it out of, let's say, Google, right, my Google Drive, but damn, I created that list in Excel and there's a copy of it over in OneDrive. Or I did it on my Mac and I backed everything up, or on my pad, and I backed everything up to iCloud or Dropbox or whatever it is I'm using, right, for data duplication, backup, and things. Or I shared it with him and he had it on his phone or her, right? It's a rat's nest is what it is, right? How do you help with that?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I think there's two parts to that. First of all, most enterprises don't even know. Like if you have 30 versions of a contract sitting in 5 different enterprise data stores, most customers don't even have a good idea of knowing where all of my sensitive data is and understanding that with context. And so the first thing we do is we nail data discovery. We use deep learning as a form of advanced natural language processing to give customers a view into all of their sensitive data with context. Everything from business critical data such as contracts and stock agreements to financial data to intellectual property to PI, PCI. Now, once we have done that, we're also able to autonomously compare thematically similar documents to give customers views into where the risk might be. For example, here's a contract that has been shared outside the company when it should not have been.
Let's stop right here, though, because I want you to dig in here. How do you discover all this data? How do you ascertain,
we have a SaaS
sensitivity?
We have a SaaS platform,
right?
That very quickly can scan an Office 365 or a OneDrive or a Windows file server. And at that point, we're using deep learning models to develop a semantic understanding of the content then giving customers thematic clusters. So we'll automatically, without the customers having to write a single rule, a single policy up front, we create these thematic clusters of data, tax filings, stock agreements, contracts, trading data, and so on. And then once we do that, we're mining that data for who has access, where it's located, who should have access to that data, to give customers a risk-oriented view into all of their sensitive data.
Got to ask a stupid question. When you're doing that, you're not bringing that data out of their data store to you. You're doing it on their data store.
So both options are possible. We have customers who are deploying us as a SaaS where we're analyzing the data. We don't duplicate their data store.
You don't duplicate.
We create a mathematical representation for the data, so you can't reverse engineer the data by accessing our platform.
That's what I was asking. If you become part of the problem.
Yeah. But we can also deploy within their own premises if that's what they need.
Love it. Now, all right, so now we've identified the data, we've tagged, let's say, sensitive or critical data. Then what?
Then once we have discovered the data, we're also mining that for risk, such as inappropriate permissions, inaccurate entitlements. Let's say an employee group, a HR group has access to sensitive financial data within an asset management company. We're essentially helping mine for where there may be inappropriate or unauthorized access. And we give customers a risk-oriented view. For example, a tech company is using us to identify design data that employees are sharing with their own personal Gmail. Is an example of an insider risk issue. So we're not only identifying the design data, but we're also finding where scenarios and instances where employees are sharing that data with their own personal email, and then helping remediate those scenarios where we go in and disable those sort of inappropriate permissions or entitlements to ensure that employees can no longer share sensitive data with their own personal email, as an example.
Got it. Love it. So let's now, as a business perspective, talking to the audience, they're listening and they say, Karthik, this sounds great. How do I deploy it? What's it going to cost me? Right? What particulars? Don't give out anything you're not comfortable with.
Fair enough. So what we recommend to anybody who's interested in our product is to try it out within your own environment. It takes us 15 minutes to stand up our product. And within a few days, the customer can get a representative view into all of their data. All where we see risk, within their own environment without them having to do any work except for us to essentially get access provision to be able to scan and provide these insights. And once we do that, if the customer likes it, which almost all of our customers have, then they can essentially scale that to a production deployment.
And how's this priced?
It's priced as an annual subscription.
It's a subscription model.
Correct.
And based upon how much data you scan?
Based on the data that we monitor, in a sort of a tiered model where we have a discovery module, a risk monitoring module, and a remediation module that customers can choose to buy based off of the capabilities that they care about.
Love it. Sounds great. And it's concentric.ai as well as concentricai.com.
Correct.
You can go check it out there. Let's talk a little bit about RSA for a little bit. What were your impressions so far?
Oh, first of all, it's great to be back.
Amen.
Our last show was RSA 2020, and so wonderful to be able to meet so many people, and so glad to see innovation alive and thriving. And year after year, it just feels like there's just a continuing set of security challenges that enterprises are continuing to face. More complex, and very thrilled and happy to be part of this community.
Absolutely. Karthik, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck with Concentric AI. Actually, we didn't mention, you guys also announced a funding round recently?
We did. We announced a $14.5 million funding round led by Ballistic Ventures. Ballistic
cool.
is a cybersecurity-focused VC fund led by Tetchline, Barmack Mefta, Kevin Mandia, and Derek Smith. And City Ventures participated as well. And looking forward to leveraging the funding to accelerate our go-to-market and engineering efforts.
I love it. Check them out, Concentric AI. Look, we all have data we probably don't know about and wish we did. Karthik, thank you. Come back, keep us posted on this one.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Hey, we're going to take a break here at RSA Conference. We're live. Things are heating up on the floor here. I guess it's almost keynote time. We'll be back in a moment.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, we're back here in Valencia on the show floor. It's I don't know, it's kind of a slow hum now. It's quieter than I saw earlier today. There's still, looking out, I see a lot of people at booths. Some booths are more crowded than others. But there's a decent crowd.
Yeah, people were partying last night.
A lot of partying.
Yeah.
Well, you don't eat dinner here till 8:30, 9 o'clock. So it's hard to get in before midnight. Anyway, let me introduce you to my guest. His name is Ital Schwartz. He is the founder, CTO of Commodore. And just so in case you know, Commodore here, like in Kubernetes, it's spelled with a K, Komodor.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
The website is Commodore.com?
Yeah.
Commodore.com. Ital, welcome.
Well, hey, happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. Ital, I gave some of the information, but that's easy stuff. Why don't you share with the audience a little bit of your story and the Commodore story?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Thank you. So my name is Itiel. I'm the founder and the CTO of Commodore. Our mission in life in Commodore is to help dev and develop and DevOps to troubleshoot and fix issues in Kubernetes much faster than ever. So a little bit about my background. I worked as a developer, a DevOps, and SRE. Different names for pretty much the same position.
Same job.
Across different companies. I started at eBay, and then I worked for a couple of smaller startups, and then I founded Commodore. But in the end of the day, I think that even I really like developing stuff. Most time of like my career was fixing issues, fixing problems. Like I was really in a companies where uptime was super critical, and that is like when every downtime worth like millions of dollars, you try to stay up as much as you can. And that was basically what I've done like for the last couple of years before starting Commodore. And like Commodore was born mainly because, first of all, I really like Kubernetes. Like I started working with Kubernetes 6 years ago, something like that, when it was still new. And after working with like bare metal and EC2, I was like, this is amazing. Like it looks so easy and it's so much fun that I fell in love. And also like, obviously the community in Kubernetes is a very big factor in why I love like the ecosystem. Like, you know, back then, like again, like 6 years ago, Helm was, I don't know, in alpha or things like that. Things were just starting to build up, but there was really good vibes, like everywhere. Like people are trying to donate, and people are trying like to make the ecosystem much better, and that is why basically I started Commodore together with Ben Ofiri, which worked in Google and like mainly on Borg. And it was born mainly from our pain, like trying to understand, given a problem in Kubernetes, given an issue, how can I understand how to solve it as fast as possible with as less steps as possible, basically. So like what we try to do in Commodore is to take all of the cumbersome parts of troubleshooting, trying to understand what changed, how did it impact the rest of the system, what was the ripple effect, and put everything in a very simple and easy to use timeline. So our users can simply go and understand how did the system change over time. And on top of it, we are adding more and more like root cause analysis capabilities. We have like baked in Kubernetes playbook that simplify the troubleshooting process for our users. And I will say we don't do any like AI ops or things like that. We spend a lot of time solving, fixing, researching Kubernetes. We really know what it's take in order to fix the problem. And we simply take like the boring and like hard steps and do it for our users. So pretty fun. I will say that like 2 days ago, we just announced like the round B, which is a great like confidence from the community led by Tiger of like $42 million. And we are also starting a self-serve just now like at KubeCon, so people can go into the Commodore website, try it out, playing without talking with any like salesperson or something like that. So it's like the company is really growing over like the last couple of years, so it's super fun.
This is one of the easiest interviews I've ever done.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you just raised about 42 million from led by Tiger, which is I think the largest VC
Tiger
in the world
and
right
Excel
now.
led the A round, so and
okay, so this was the B round.
Yeah.
This is good money. And so one of the things that's enabled what you were really working on before, but by having this kind of backing, is a self-serve kind of SaaS-based
offering. I will say that the money is used like for two main things. The first one is to enable Commodore to be much more widespread across the community. So self-serve and everyone can try Commodore, install it, and like play with the product, which is super fun. The other thing that we are spending a lot of our time and our effort is, like I said, the automated playbook, like having the ability to solve problems much faster using Commodore. Like when you try to think about like solving even the smallest Kubernetes issue, it turns out to be much more complex than you expect. And that is where we put a lot of our effort, like having those capabilities and this kind of like taking troubleshooting to the next level. So very like hard, but very rewarding once it works.
Excellent. So I know you're the CTO and you may not have the answer to this, but for our friends out here, in the world, you're right. You came into Kubernetes at an exciting time, right? I've followed this story for 7 years, 6 years, whatever. 2016, 7 years now. One of the beautiful things about this community is if you build a good product, sort of the marketing and sales almost takes care of itself, right? Because word gets out and people start using it and so forth. But, look, you have investors now who want to see a return. They want to do marketing. How do you market something like Commodore?
It's a great question. It's a combination. Like you have the more traditional marketing. I would say like we try to like have a lot of content across the web. We are like have a lot of resources when it comes to Kubernetes troubleshooting that we're like publishing or on our website, and it is very satisfying. You know, sometimes one of our developers, like inside Commodore, is having a problem. He used Commodore, obviously, but he searched for Google, and like we are the first answer a lot of the times for most common issues in Kubernetes. So this is like one very good marketing channel. And the other one is we're going more into like open source plays. We try to give back to the community, and you know, it goes like both ways. So we released 2 months ago a project named ValidCube.
Okay.
Yeah, which helps like developers and DevOps to validate their YAML. Giving a YAML file, like it's a browser, like validcube.com. You put the YAML, and Commodore uses open source tools such as Trivi and Polaris and KubeNet in order to validate and to make sure the YAML is lived up to the best standards. So I will say that things like that also bring back to the community is the things I like the most, like bringing back, and you know, it does bring us also like traffic, so it's a win-win situation. So this is like another very good marketing channel that we see.
And then, so you tell another, like a common pattern we see is, look, for companies who really want to get the most out of Kubernetes at scale, right? If you're just running one little cluster, one little thing, you get away.
You know, completely.
But when you want to scale, now it gets real, right? What is kind of in the Commodore kind of story, what is that inflection point where you say, wait a second, you need a Commodore-like tool here? Or is it for every single one?
It's a great question. I think it's more a matter like, I think that today the product can pretty much fit to everyone. If you're like 3 people company or like 5 people company, I don't think it will change your life. I think it can help you, but in the end of the day, you usually have like one super expert. He's doing pretty much everything. He knows pretty much everything. So the product will be good for him, but I don't think it will be a game changer. I think usually when you start to have like 2 or 3 people in the SRE team, in the DevOps team, then things become much more complex. You have a lack of knowledge for some parts of the company, like there are the Kubernetes experts and there are the novices. Even inside the company, people are doing change that other people are unaware of. So I think that even for like a team of 10 developers, 2 DevOps, something like that, things are already complex enough. So this is like what we usually see. I will say that we have customers with even a smaller like setup, but these usually customers that are super microservices, even they are very small, like companies that has like 100 microservices, even they are 5 developers. Then for those kind of companies, Commodore can also fit in like perfectly. It's a matter of complexity, and like the virgin point is like multiple clusters, multiple team members. But you know, the nice thing about Kubernetes, or like the bad thing about Kubernetes, it depends where you look at.
It's a double-edged sword.
It's a double-edged sword. It's like it is it's very easy to get started. It is very fun to get started. Like you do the hello world and oh my God, it just worked. But the day 2 operation is very hard. Like in the end of the day, it takes a lot of effort. And you know what, we are here at KubeCon. Like the first thing I ask everyone who comes to the booth is like, are you an SRE? Tell me, yeah, I'm an SRE. How much time do you spend like troubleshooting Kubernetes? Like, and for everyone is like, I don't know, like most of the time, all of my time. Some say, no, I don't troubleshoot Kubernetes at all. And I'm like, really? And he's like, no, like all of the time. This is like the only thing I do. So the pain is very, like it's crystal clear. Like no one has doubts that they are spending too much time in troubleshooting Kubernetes. So it's nice for us.
Yeah.
A bit bad for the industry. I think like in a whole, like Kubernetes is bringing a lot of positive things into the compute ecosystem, but it's
still hard.
It's
still
very hard.
But I think that's part of maturation too, is that people figure out how to make it easier, and smart entrepreneurs, smart engineers, when they come up with something that makes it easier, they know how to commercialize it. And hence companies like Commodore are born, right?
I think it's obviously a question of maturity. Like Kubernetes even we are here at KubeCon, and I like Kubernetes. It is small. Like it is, we are very early on the adoption curve. Like it's not Linux, right? We doesn't like Kubernetes is not like 20, 30, 40 years old, and there is still a lot of like blue ocean, like of tools, of processes, of culture shift that needs to
There's
happen.
a story yet to be written.
Yeah.
But that brings up a good point. Believe it or not, over the last year, especially with COVID, we're all stuck in our houses, whatever. I've heard people start talking about, okay, what's next? What's after Kubernetes? Or, how long is Kubernetes going to become a dominant? Kubernetes is compute today for a lot in the cloud. How long do you think that lasts? Is there something on the horizon?
It's a great question. Obviously, I'm very biased towards Kubernetes. Let's start with that. Like, as I see it, Kubernetes, even we're speaking a lot about like Kubernetes, KubeCon, and so on, is such a small portion out of the compute world that I think we are only like at the verge of like Kubernetes as a dominant player. I think that as databases are migrating into Kubernetes and we are only starting to see the start of it, we will see more and more adoption of Kubernetes. Like personally, I keep track on all like new technologies. I don't see anyone even close to threaten Kubernetes at the moment. And I think it will take at least a couple of more years of Kubernetes to be stable. Yeah. And people will say, oh, it's old-fashioned, like Kubernetes. You're using Kubernetes,
that's technology.
Yeah,
like
EC2,
always the new thing.
You're using bare metal EC2. You're so old, like Ansible or something like that. But I think we are really far ahead from like going and being at that point. First of all, I think Kubernetes has quite a lot to achieve before reaching that. And also, like, there are no good contender. Like, even Kubernetes, it took us, Google developed it internally, and it took a lot of time. And I see serverless. I don't see them like at the moment it's like a competition or it's a real competition. They are like the new big thing like for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, but I think Kubernetes absorbs serverless.
Exactly. I think it will be part of it. And it will be interesting to see like if someone else will come, but time will tell.
Excellent. Hey, we're about out of time. Itel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Check out Commodore, that's with a K.com. We're live in Valencia. We'll be back in a moment.
So let's not do that. Let's just get right to it. Let's not waste time. Like, you have kids who are 4 years old and you're missing their glory days while you're sitting here thinking you need these certifications that you don't need. Let's get out of it. Let's live life a little more, because you can have more life and more money and work remotely. So why did we target cloud also? I wanted to give people, cloud is one of the most biggest, I guess, industries for capital. You want to make money, you go work in data science or cloud and get good at it. Even if you're really bad at it, 6 figures is considered low pay. So if you're making 100,000 or 120,000 doing cloud engineering, cloud development, Facebook will now pay people upwards of like $800,000 for cloud development. And if we get into Microsoft, they're starting to offer $1 million contracts to people with cloud skills because they want to keep people off the market and get that talent inside their own house. Because if they can either pay you $1 million and you'll make the same equivalent thing that you would raise $1 million to build for them and they own it, or you're going to probably raise $1 million without them and have $1 million and a product that's competing against them.
Right.
Just business. So why don't we just give people the stuff like forevermore is kind of how I see it. And kind of the other way is like, I'm heavily disabled, and like, I'm at a point in my life where even though I'm younger than most people who are like I can't really muster like a work week like most people. I can probably hit about like, on an average week, like 20 hours before like I start having weird anomalies and things like that. And so like other people, they have this luxury that they can work 80 hours if they felt like it. That actually doesn't exist for me. Right. So it actually turned into part of my value proposition is because I have to find ways that even if I can only work like 5 to 10 hours in a week, I have to feed my family. I have to make sure that like I'm taking care of more than just like my wife. I have like other folks who, like in my family, I have a pretty big family. My family's huge. I'll just be blunt about that. Like there's a lot going on. And like other people have families too. Some folks got things going on that aren't your job. Sure. And like, I have to be able to make sure that people have like a roof over their heads. And now it's like, I'm funding this like underground Nexus thing and funding like multiple companies now. And if I have to worry about what I'm going to eat tomorrow, then that means I'm going to worry about how at least like 10 people at the minimum are going to eat tomorrow. And I can't do that. Right. So just start making some money. That's all I want people to do.
Exactly. It reminds me of the true idea and the true motivation behind the development and birth of open source. To me, that's what is culminating within what you're doing, because basically you're creating something that might as well be open source, but you're giving it to somebody to further their career with. And to me, that's invaluable. And like you said, if you have to worry about how you're going to feed the family, or if you have to worry about how you're going to get to the doctor next week because you work too much, you make yourself sick, I mean, how much is that really worth? So you have to get to a point where things kind of autonomously run, and you have fingers everywhere to pull that in, right? So that's kind of what I do with I do like 3D printing, and I have a business on the side where I make random shit and sell it to people on a 3D printer. I'm always looking for that next side hustle, because that's the entrepreneurial spirit. I'm just like, every time I create something and I make it a product and I sell it, it's like, it's exciting. It's like a magic trick, right? Because it's Absolutely. Like, oh shit, it worked. Like, oh my God. And then when I look at the profit margins, it's phenomenal. And the reason why I picked 3D printing is because a spool of 3D printing filament costs $24, and I can create this magnificent, huge, complex object and sell it for $80. And and the margin is just profit margin is enormous. So I mean, those are the types of things that I look for, and I think that your mind is in the same place. Like, let's see if we can create something that's going to be proficient, efficient, and not take 5 million people to create it. Right?
Yes.
And that's the key point, because that is your profit margin. When you have to employ a lot of people to develop things, there goes your profit, and you're struggling and you have a very small income. But if you do it yourself and learn how to fabricate that to do it multiple times, I mean, it's like a cookie cutter, and it's like a golden cookie cutter. So I really respect what you guys are doing. Like I've looked into it, and I've been around for a pretty long time. And when they were talking about the copy and paste idea and how it ran and how it worked, I was like, that's fucking phenomenal. You've taken the idea of open source and developed something much, much more powerful. And it may take, there's a lot of people out there that are entrepreneurs and inventors and just visionaries who come up with these things, And at the moment, people are doubtful. They don't think it'll work. They don't want to touch it. But years down the road, people look back and go, man, that shit was pretty smart.
Yeah.
So I try to encourage that. I try to encourage people to think on their own and really, go off in directions that they want to go. Don't let what the industry dictates you should do be what you do. Go venture for yourself, experience shit, and fail. Please fail. Because if you don't fail, you'll never learn. And that's one of the things that I had to do for myself, because I'm the type of person that I can watch somebody else do it all day long and I can watch them fail. But I'm the type of jackass that will go, they failed. I wonder if I'll fail too. And I'll just grab it. So,
it's such a thing.
Yeah. And there's been failures. And, I lend a lot of my successes, my big successes, to being a product of my biggest failures.
It's such a thing. Yeah. And it's good to outline that too. Because same here for me is like most things that I've done just like failed into the ground. It's just the thing.
Yeah. But just like with hacking, I think the word that I live by is persistence, right? So if I compromise a network, you can get the keys of the kingdom, but where do you really get the most intel and the most information and most monetary value? Through persistence, right?
True.
So that's the same thing I carry over into business. Persistence. And I keep telling my analysts and I tell people applying for jobs, persistence is key. If you decide, oh, well, shit ain't working, I'm just going to give up. Well, okay, see ya. Because if you'd have been persistent 2 more days, it might have worked out.
It's so true. Yeah. It's what you just said is the one, because people ask me like, well, what should I be doing? What should I be doing? Almost the only thing that matters in the online world is that persistence. Also, because like people have to see persistence too, because you don't get trust without persistence. You don't get recognition without persistence. No one knows who you are without it. And it kind of reminds me, this reminds me of that quote, if I can remember what it is. But I saw like on a YouTube video from like Casey Neistat. And ever since I saw it, I was like, that describes me. But he's like, the rational person adapts to the world around them, and the like irrational person expects the world to adapt to them.
Right.
And all progress though relies on the irrational person.
Right.
And so I tend to like, I mean, for me, it's like, I choose progress. So if that's what that means, then like, cause there are other statements like that, like in a way, rationality is not the path to progress.
Yes.
And sometimes you have to go try something that sounds like it might be risky or sounds crazy. And if so many people aren't just like risk intolerant or just like averse or whatever, like they're just like completely intolerant of risk. They're like, risk, I can't do that.
Right.
And then like persistence, that's risky. And you have to have some audacity to be persistent with some things. Not only do you have to have some audacity, you sometimes do have to be completely irrational to be like, no, I'm putting my foot down on this. I'm making this. And then everyone's like, no, that sounds crazy. Well, we don't have time for that as well. I used to get all these people who'd be like, well, we don't have time for that. And then they'd propose all these things that take 8 to 9 to 10 to 20 times as long. And like, I come from a very like experienced background of like building like all kinds of scales of environments. Like I've built like environments that cost like over millions of dollars to like maintain. I've worked on like dark sites, worked on like infrastructure for like NASA security and things like that. Like Air Force, like worked on like satellite infrastructure. I mean, you go down all these long lists. Trust me, if I say something's going to take longer than something else, I've probably actually spent years dealing with it.
Right.
And it's people will be like, well, but this is going to be faster. And then what I'll usually do is I'll sometimes like cooperate and be like, oh, really now? And I'll just like be like, let's go. And then it's like taking them a while I'll just like open up a side project on purpose while we're doing this other thing that the longest, most painful way possible. And then with all of this excess workload, I'll be like, make this other thing that's a significantly more efficient version of it. And then I'll go and start like selling that thing so that they see it. No, I don't do that if it's like a partner that I like. It's usually like someone who I am like about to quit working with, so that I can just make sure that they know what I think about them. And then when I leave, then I'm like, this is why I was able to leave, because you didn't want to do something that made sense. And so I left because of that, because I prefer things that make sense.
And here's the end product, which is much better than the one you were creating. And guess what? I finished a lot quicker.
Yeah. And then if they have a non-compete, I'll put it in a non-competing market or industry, because to me, it's not about competing with them. It's just, I just want to prove the principle that it's like, well, I'm just going to change the use case, change the industry, change all these things. And I just need you to see that what I'm talking about, you're going to learn something, and then I'll profit from it. And I don't know what's going to happen to your company, because I told you that there's a better alternative, and I offered it to you first, and I'm going to stick with the thing that's more lucrative. I'm sorry.
100% of the time. And what's funny is you talked about, sometimes those type of people, those visionaries, are looked at as being irrational, right? So I look back at some of my role models from history, and I look at Einstein, and I look at Da Vinci, and some of the things that they created. And back during their time, especially Einstein, there was a good amount of people that thought he was just out of his fucking mind. And then you look at Da Vinci, who, fast forward to modern day, and you look at his sketches, and he developed the helicopter before there was flight.
I looked at those. That's such a thing.
Yeah. So those are definitely my role models. And like this Nikola Tesla, and the fight that he had with the FBI and the government about, his inventions and his ideas. There's people scattered and peppered all throughout history that were visionaries and had their own dreams and concepts that came into fruition, but during the progression, they were persecuted, prosecuted, and called crazy.
Yeah.
But we read about them today in history books, because they made such a huge impact on modern day history. And I think we're going to see, probably not in my lifetime, in your lifetime, but fast forward, down the road to when cars are flying. Totally. People will probably look back and say, you know what? Those crazy guys back in the beginning of cybersecurity had a fucking real idea, like this thing actually worked, and nobody listened to them, but now we live by it. So I tend to stick to that belief, as well as, I came into this world alone. And when I look at the masses and people following, the masses and trying to conform to what's expected, I've never been that person. I've always been the person who looked at how things are running and, talked to a few people and kind of got an idea, and I said, okay, that's cool, but I don't want to be part of that crowd. I want to go on my own and figure shit out for myself. And of course, as a kid, that caused a hell of a lot of problems, and I got in a hell of a lot of trouble. But as an adult now, like, I've had that experience, and I know what it takes to be successful. And I know what happens if you don't put in that persistence. Definitely. So with the podcast, that was one of the things that I struggled with early on when it started getting to be accepted and more, I guess, listened to or whatever, is I felt the pressure of, should I conform and should I make it a podcast where it's clean and everybody, is happy-go-lucky, and I followed the same mantras the podcaster before me. And it really put a lot of pressure on me. And at one point I wanted to quit, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, because in my head, I felt like I was putting pressure on myself to be like something I wasn't.
Totally.
And I really had to take some time. I think I took like a month off at that point and sat down and said, you know what, this is my life. This is my head. These are my thoughts. They could tune in or tune out. I don't really care. But I'm going to do what makes me happy. And this is what makes me happy. And it's successful. So,
it's the right decision, I think.
Yeah.
So I think it's an awesome podcast.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. To be honest with you, like, up until recently, I really questioned if anybody even listened to the podcast. Like, I would see the views or whatever on YouTube, and I'm just like, that could be bullshit, bait clicks, whatever. But then when I started seeing the stats from the streaming services like Spotify and stuff like that, and realized I was in 50 different countries, I was like,
oh, yeah.
What the fuck?
You're everywhere.
Like, why
can't be escaped?
Like, what is wrong with people? Why are you listening to me? but yeah, I mean, and that comes from the imposter syndrome too, which I think is really real. The one term, the buzzword that I want to talk about that I think is just absolute nonsense is skills gap. What I'm seeing in the industry right now, and I have been seeing for a while, is a lot of entry level positions that are expecting people to be engineers. And
yes.
It's such bullshit. I'm like, where are you coming up with this? Like, I actually had a talk with somebody today. I interviewed somebody for a position. They ended up getting hired. But the story that they told me really shocked me. So they were telling me about a interview that they went on, and they mentioned during the interview, the executives, they said, we really need someone to help us rewrite this job rec to post online, because right now we don't have a lot of postings and we want to really refine this. Will you help us do that? Without being hired, this person, out of the kindness of their heart, said, sure, I'll help you do that. So they wrote the job description. The company posted it. When this person applied for it, they said, oh, no, I'm sorry. You don't have any, you don't have any on-the-job training.
People are ridiculous. I'm right here with you, because I'll tell you where this also makes me just curl is because I do build businesses, and I work with different partners and things like that. And I've kind of gotten to a point where there's certain companies that I toss up certain red flags with so fast that it's not even funny now. And I'll tell you what those red flags are, because it's the skills gap thing. If a company hires based on qualifications, I don't believe that someone can be qualified for a job till they've already been there for a year. And someone else told me that first, and I've been thinking about that since 2015 or something. 100%. And the more I think about it, the more I believe that has to be true. And so it's okay, so what I started teaching then is, follow this task that requires you to complete something from vendor docs. And then lo and behold, if people can do that, then I can assume that they can probably do just about any general technical job, unless they're quite literally going to be a principal engineer and have to have had years managing large budgets with scalable cloud infrastructure, something crazy.
Right.
But that's you only need one or two of those people in a company, put them in your VP or executive branch or something.
Right.
Everyone else, what are they doing? Configuring an API. And then the secret, let me tell everyone the secret that I hope everyone remembers is that there are vendor docs. And what are vendor docs? The people who make the product, if a product is working, and I'm going to use Python as an example, if the product is working, it's probably because of the vendor docs from the creators are good enough for adoption to occur, which means that it's just a bunch of step 1, step 2, step 3. And then what that also means is that the vendor docs are almost always up to date as to where I see a lot of people, when I try to teach them things, they don't go to vendor docs first. They go straight to Google, because that also does technically make sense. But there's a faster path before Google. Vendor first. Go to the vendor. Find a step-by-step from the vendor. There's probably an ocean of them, and they're all GitLab is such a good example of this.
Yes.
If you go to gitlab.com, if you cannot figure out something with GitLab from their vendor docs, then I will not hire you, or I will not work with you, not for anything technical ever, because it's just step 1, step 2. And to this day, even people who I've met who've never touched a computer before, they can go and do things with GitLab.
Yes. It's like following a fucking recipe. It's not hard.
Yes. Step 1, click on this checkbox. Step 2, look for this exact word and do this exact thing with this exact word. And I'm just okay, so do we need a degree for that? No.
You need to know how to read. That's basically it. I'm sure that we could teach some of these 3-year-olds that are working with iPads. Cruise through the iPad all day long. We could probably teach them how to develop shit just off the vendor docs.
Get kids making things for each. I used to make things for kids on the playground. My first, business was making Beanie Babies were happening, and I was in 3rd grade, and it was the in thing. And I was like, what if I made my own Beanie Babies? And I asked my parents for some beans and some little some cloth, and I sewed like little jellyfish out of like, I don't know, it was just bean bags with like yarn hanging from them, but kids would buy them for $5 on the playground. And then like in 5th grade, it was the first time I actually made a partner deal, because I asked my dad if I could copy the Zelda soundtrack, and he's like, well, that's technically not legal if I wanted to copy it and resell it. So he said, but you can get permission from the company. And so I called them. I was like a little kid. And they're like, that's so cute. You're like a little kid. Yeah, we'll approve it. So that was the first time I got like my first business approval. And then I was like, basically just recording. My dad had this like fancy cassette tape thing where you could take the CD and record it on a cassette tape. So I was giving kids like these Zelda cassette tapes for money. Nice. And I'd make like calculator program, but really it's like, you can kind of just do stuff. You can just make things.
I was just about to say that, a lot of people don't understand is all you have to have is an idea. It's easy to take that idea and bring it to market. I started off doing 3D printing last, I think, December. So it hasn't been too long. And I found an idea. I created this lantern. It cost me $4 to print. I'm selling them for $80. I made over $1,000 in 3 weeks. And it's like just little shit like that. I remember in school, my first business was taking candy to school and selling it to the other kids, because in the lunchroom, they wouldn't sell candy. And everybody wants candy. So I would fill my pockets of my bag with candy, and kids would come up and say, hey, Jolly Ranchers, how much for Jolly Rancher? I'd, tell them 25 cents or whatever. By the end of the day, I had a pocket full of money. I'd go home. My parents were like, what do you do? Where's this coming from?
Yeah. Then you can like go buy things. Cause it's like, hey, I made my own money.
Yeah.
You can't tell me what I can't buy.
Exactly. And even work, I still work for a company. I'm still employed full-time, 9-to-5 job, but I have so many things on the side that I do that really fulfill that part of me. Helping people, mentoring people. I do a lot with law enforcement over in the UK, mentoring former offenders for cybercrime. And I just enjoy it. I like having fingers in a lot of things because it provides variety and it keeps me from being super fucking bored. Because
I totally get that.
Yeah, burnout to me is only established when I start getting bored. And when I pile stuff on, it's a little taxing, but I don't get bored. But I do have to take those sabbaticals, like 3 or 4 days here and there where I just don't do shit because I'm working and my brain's going 24/7. It
happens.
Yeah, right.
I relate to that because it's interesting. Like I don't meet a lot of because I like keeping my day team because I keep a 9-to-5 too. Yeah. But I guess because even though I teach people how to like break free from like 9-to-5 lives and things like that, for me, I will say I like the routine of it and I like having the right people around. Yeah. Yeah.
So with the neurodiversity I have, structure and routine is super important. So that provides me, the 9-to-5 provides me that structure of my life to where the other parts of my life can be absolutely chaotic, but I can still go back to the structure.
That's the thing I need to, I fall apart without it. Like I have to have like, okay, I wake up, this is like a thing that I have to check. And then I talk to these people almost every day. Yes. And if those people aren't around every day, I get depressed. And I'm super introverted. And I think part of it for me is like I have trouble wanting to socialize. Yes. And so if I don't have things to force me out of my bubble, I'll start getting like so isolated that I'll be like 4 or 5. Now I have like more family members around oftentimes. But if like family's out, especially for whatever reason, for like a trip or something like that, like I have a strong tendency to just like vanish and like no one will know what happened to me. I'll just be in a dark corner and that's that. So like the 9-to-5 for me is a little more of like, I need to have like people I like, people I trust, and people who like know that I have some weird things going on in my head who like are fine dealing with me. And then I'm like excited to be like, oh, check out this thing I made, because I love making random things. And so I guess I would be referred to as like a Renaissance employee who like, I watch the whole company and then I like see what's going on. I'm like, that person needs this thing. Then I'll go like code it because I love AI. And I'm like, can I help this thing with AI? Can I help that thing with AI? And then they're like, Okay. That's a good time, but I'm very specific about who I work with though. And I will go years without working with people if I don't like who I found to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a thing. I guess what keeps you with your day team too, just like the routine, all that stuff too, the team.
It's the exact same thing. I work with two people who I consider family and my best friends. And one of them is my boss. And he's just like us. We have that 9 to 5 and we're dedicated and really love and passionate for our job, our 9 to 5. But he and I will be up until, 2:00 in the morning, printing and texting each other, whatever, saying, hey, check this shit out. Hey, check out this new filament. We're always doing something new. And I think that's important is really being able to trust who you work with and really knowing that you can be yourself and it's accepted.
Totally.
Because, growing up in the environment that I grew up in, I was expected to be a certain way and do certain things and act a certain way. And when I got older, it was like, fuck that. That's not who I am. I'm me. I don't have these rules programmed up here. Like I wasn't born with this rule set or your morals. I was born with my own. Totally. And I look at everybody else and I accumulate that, what they have and their beliefs and how they operate. And I pull what I like from each one of those individuals and I embed that in myself.
Totally.
I'm not one of those ones who will follow what everybody expects me to do. And it's caused issues in the past with family and relationships and schooling and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, those people are still doing what they're doing and are happy being drones. That's not me. Like I have to do my own shit. Yeah. And so like the introvert part that you spoke about is so me. When I moved back to the States last year from London, I moved to Chattanooga. I have an apartment in a really nice historical building and I never leave. Everything I need is right here. I'm not a big fan of like running into random people on the street. Not my thing. And sometimes, what keeps me accountable and what keeps me social is I schedule these podcasts with people that I like, that I respect, that are interested in me. And I want that social interaction. I get to choose that social interaction if they choose to be on the show. And
it's a good way to socialize.
Yeah. And to me, that keeps me in check. That makes me social. It makes me accountable. I have to show up. It forces me to be social because I've made a commitment and I never fail on my commitments. So yeah, I mean, it's just that's me in a nutshell is the introvert and I get out when I want to, but there are times when I shut the light canceling curtains and I hermit and that's,
I get that.
I'm happy there. I'm happy there.
Like I definitely use the DevSecOps dojo to pull me out of my shell in a similar way. Like, cause I like coming on to things like podcasts like this too. Cause it's like, I want to come talk to folks who I like talking to, but what helps me with the dojo is like, I need to feel responsible for other people to motivate myself sometimes. And if there's no one else who I feel like is depending on me, there's certain things that even if I wish that I would accomplish it, I just won't. And so by having the dojo, there's always someone who needs something, which I want. And I think that folks who talk to me enough in there can tell I do get so many messages now that it's kind of hard to keep up with everyone. But still, it's one of those things where it's like, why did I want to make it so that I have to monetize my members? Because I know that if they're going to make this commitment to what I'm saying that they're going to do, and I'm going to help them like make a living, I know what it's like to be broke in the past. I know what it's like to be like starting out and trying to figure out what the hell you're going to do. And you like go to investors and they all turn you down, or you go apply to jobs and they all tell you that you're just, or they ghost you or come up with who knows what. And you got bills to pay, you got life situations getting complicated. All of a sudden health stuff starts setting in and you just
bro,
all just swoops in at once.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm experiencing that now. Like, so the only reason why I was allowed back to the United States was I was diagnosed with epilepsy.
Sure.
In the UK, since it's socialized medicine, they frown upon people being indigent and not being citizens for socialized healthcare. So that kind of got me back into the States. The hospital communicated with the embassy and was able to squeeze me back in.
Makes sense.
But growing older, it's like at one point in my life, I wanted to be all of these things, and I wanted to be up here, and I wanted to do all this stuff. But I'm at a point in my life now where I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm happy, diving off into different things. But to me, it's not climbing that ladder anymore. It's not trying to be this acronym. Totally. It's more of just being happy and helping other people find what made me happy.
I love that. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So I told the last guest, I was like, one of the main differences between me and a lot of people that I know is I don't gauge my success on what I've done. I gauge it on what other people have done that I've helped or mentored or helped them develop. Their success absolutely fulfills me, even though it's their success, because I helped them get to that point. And to me, there's a ton of fulfillment in that. And I think that's why another reason why I keep the 9 to 5 is because I can take these people coming into the industry, these young people, and watch them progress and encourage them.
That's very true. Yeah.
And just watching an intern go from an intern to, a SOC 1 or a SOC 2 or an engineer, to me, that is like so cool because I interviewed this person and now look what they're doing. Totally. It is so cool. But yeah, I really enjoy watching the success of other people. And I know in our industry, that's fucking rare because
it's very true.
It seems like everybody's holding
big pants.
Everybody's holding the pitchfork going, fail.
Yeah. And then you have these people who are like, well, you should be more like me. And then you can, and it's like,
I'll pass on that.
There's like a club. So anyone who's like tried to get into cybersecurity as an industry, because like one of the reasons why I started doing a lot of the things, I'm like, well, if I can't get like funding from the like Kumbaya Club, like I can fund myself because I think it's one of the things I will probably believe this forever. I think everyone at some point should learn something about how to actually just make money on their own, which is probably why the dojo's emphasized around that. And like, I see like in 10 years, I need the dojo to be running itself where people are like teaching each other how to do that. And it's kind of like a similar kind of thing.
Right.
And it's if you have the ability to make money on your own, then when you do go work at a 9 to 5, it's still different though, because then it's like you're choosing to be there. And then also the people who you work with know that you're there not because they're like coercing you with money and going to like try to lay you off or whatever. Yeah. They like know that you actually want to be there because you could just leave at any second if you really felt like it. And it's like, well, I mean, you've worked with like different kinds of contracts. And if someone's not treating you well or just being disrespectful or causing problems in general or just making things too stressful, it's like, just leave. And it's just not even worth it. Yeah. And then it's finding other people who are trying to get that for themselves and they are trying to like make something. You're so right with like, especially this talent gap stuff. In a lot of ways, it's like the talent gap is the failure of, not in a lot of ways. I think in most of the ways, it's just a complete failure of like the hiring organization and how they want to run things. Like
it's not related to it. That is the problem.
Yeah. Cause it's if you have, there's more talent in the market that can do the work that people are claiming they can't find talent for. Right. And it's because they look for, well, you see it like in the dating world, people treat hiring like dating, where they're like, oh, I'm going to choose the person with the best jaw structure and the perfect hips and the ripped abs and what, all those things. And then they like try to like make their relationship that they choose built around those things. And then they'll even choose like a partnership around stuff that they don't even have the same worldview. They don't even have the same idea of what respect should look like. And then they just like fight each other and don't know why they're fighting each other all the time. And it's like that. Hiring managers, they're like, okay, so if they have the ripped abs, maybe that's the CISSP. And then maybe they have like the perfect like jawline and they always have like a collared shirt on. Maybe that's the security plus, right? And all those things or whatever. then that is the perfect hire. And then they'll hire them. And I'll tell you what happens is a lot of those people are good at passing tests, and that is their skill.
Yes.
And then you end up with people who are good at passing tests, but not good at doing work. And then they say that the problem is that the talent's not out there when they're hiring test takers, not engineers.
Yes. So my mantra and kind of like my MO when I was younger was social engineering my way into a job. And before people freak out and like, oh, what are you talking about? Let me explain. So companies expect a certain look. They expect a certain level of professionalism. They expect you to look a certain way, to talk a certain way, to spit the buzzwords out that they're looking for. So I studied that. And I'm not the type of person to wear a suit or a tie. And I would do that just because I knew that's what they were expecting me to do. And then I would go in and blow their mind because I actually knew what I was talking about. But as I got older, it's like one joy that I found through my success in my career is that I've gotten to a point where I don't have to go look for a job. People will contact me, and then I can choose where I want to go. But that only occurs when you prove yourself throughout your other jobs you've had. Mm-hmm. Like you can't have a shitty job history and expect at some point in your life someone's going to call you and say, "Hey, I got a job for you." That's not how shit works. You have to prove yourself first, put in the time and the effort, and then you can be completely individualistic and fly by the seat of your pants because they want you for you. And I think that's part of the hiring flaw that we have right now, especially with certifications, is when a company tells me that they have to have this certification in order to walk in the door. To me, that's identifying to me that they're not concerned about people. It's not a people company, and they will fire your ass, lay you off quicker than anybody else because Guess what? You're nothing but a certification because that's what it took to get in the door. And I think that's really sad because my platform lately, about the past year, was we need to start treating people, like humans, individuals, not numbers, not employees, not a developer, not a hacker. These are people with lives, right? And to assign a value to a person based on a certification, to me, it's just bullshit. They may have the certification, but they may be a complete nightmare to be around or to communicate with.
Very true. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what you said earlier too, because like, I feel like in a lot of ways, certifications play into the what do you call it? Instant gratification culture.
Yes.
Because we're so used to get this thing now, Amazon, they want you to buy it now, everything now.
Yeah.
And if you want to find someone who's going to make your business money, they have to have some form of persistence to stick through things that might be really hard to stomach for 3 years or longer, at least 1 year. Come on now. And certification, it's oftentimes, boot camps kill me. Certifications and boot camps, I have so much trouble. And I signed a paper saying that I wouldn't talk bad about boot camps, and I'm doing it. It's happening. It's happening now. Just don't sue me.
Nobody listens to podcasts anyways. Don't worry about it.
Perfect. We're good. They probably wouldn't trust this podcast anyway. They're like, "Oh, that's one of those people. We can't support those people." So certifications, you study for a season and then it's over. And if you hire someone who is there for a season and then it's over, there's a reason why a lot of times you see performance, and I'm a data scientist. So I watch, if you work and you come with analytics backgrounds and things like that, you see worker activity go up for maybe 3 months, and then you'll see a harsh nosedive.
Yeah.
And it's that is the general pattern that you get with certifications, because it's you're studying up, it's a lot real fast, done. And one of the things that then companies will do is they'll just have your job be to just go get more certifications sometimes if they don't know what else to do with you, because then they can go and use that as a marketing tool. Right. And so while people think that the certifications that their company is funding them to get is because the company might believe in them and that it's going to supposedly be good for them, well, really the company's just oh, well, we're just trying to check some boxes for compliance, saying we have someone with this cert, we have someone at this cert, we have someone at this cert, and they're just going through making sure that they're checking off all the cert boxes. And every every time they pay for that $1,000 certification for you, or that $150,000 SANS lesson for you, and all those different things. And I actually like SANS. They do some stuff that is a little more effective than others. But once they've paid for that, then all of a sudden they have a marketing tool. And that marketing tool of that certification is more valuable than your output as an employee. They make more money off of you having that cert than your actual work and your actual general value for companies who build their way that way. And then the certification is actually part of their financial bottom line and their economics for that to work. So boot camps, I think, are extra complicated because we all have to remember that human beings, the brain still works like a muscle. The brain has limited energy, limited capacity. And I don't know how many people have researched decision fatigue, but look up decision fatigue. You can go on, what's a good website for that? Plause1.org is a good website for like some of that deeper research. So if you go to like Plause1 and look in like scientific community research and you look up decision fatigue, you'll find out it's not just something that people make up in blogs. It's ongoing studies that people have done for years upon years upon years. And the way we could kind of illustrate this is that if you're a human being, then whoever you are, you have X amount of decisions that your brain can generally chew on before it starts to like decline in productivity or trying to figure something out.
Right.
If you continually push your brain to make more decisions than it's primed to be able to do, that amplifies the concept of burnout, so that burnout is where you're then so decision fatigued that you actually are at a permanent hint. Yeah, it's just like a stall where your decision-making capacity is like gone.
Yeah.
And that's what burnout actually really comes from in a lot of ways. And it's physiological. You burn calories when you make decisions. People
100%.
might not know that.
Yeah, 100%. Like the brain itself is an organ. So it requires things to be able to function. And when you overload it, and it can't get what it needs to keep going. Absolutely. And I think a lot of the problems with hiring too, when you look back at fatigue and stuff like that, the problem that I'm seeing, the majority across the board, it's not really that we're overloading analysts or we're overloading people. The problem is that we're hiring from outside instead of promoting from within, because they can spend less money bringing someone from the outside in than giving somebody a pay raise and a promotion. And I'm totally against that. And I made a point to when I started this new job was to, first of all, look to promote from within. And then after I make those promotions, then I hire outside talent to not only amplify, but encourage that promotion. Totally. Because the knowledge that person that with experience coming in can share with the rest of the team that has been gradually promoted up is phenomenal. And then everybody starts, that incline continues. It doesn't go back down.
Totally.
Another thing that I found too with certifications is that, people will work really hard. They'll study really hard for the certification. Once they get it, some people tend to plateau, and that's it. And it's sad. It really is, because I'm the type of person, like, especially when we talk about fatigue and we talk about decision fatigue. One of the things that I learned early on, just troubleshooting and building shit and doing it on my own without having somebody instruct me, just learning how to do it myself, is that you'll hit that wall. And usually for me, it's late at night, and I'll program something and it just won't fucking work over and over and over again. And it boggles me because I can't figure out what it is that is failing. But when I take a break, I go to bed, wake up the next morning, guess what? The first manipulation I make, the shit works. Why? Because I wasn't making the right decisions. I was thinking I was making the right decision, but my brain was so tired. It was just like, fuck, I don't know, choose something. So I think that, with hiring, with job performance, stuff like that, it's an individual aspect, right? Totally. It's a human aspect. So if
it's so human,
we rely on certifications to hire or promote people. I mean, what are you promoting? Are you promoting a certification or the human? Because you really need to take a step back and look at that. And the industry right now is not so much people oriented. There's very few companies that I've seen, that I've talked to, that have a culture that supports individualism and supports, freedom of thought.
So true.
It's a failure. It's a failure to the industry. And when you get one company, when you get Gartner that says you need to do this,
oh yes, Gartner.
the whole industry does it, and everybody fails. So I really try to buck the system and challenge it. Not that I want the system to fail, but I want to make it better. And the only way to make a system better is to challenge it. And so that's why I'm so vocal about certifications and what we're doing wrong in the industry, is because if you think I'm wrong, change the way you do things, see if it works. If it doesn't, I'm wrong. Great.
Yeah.
But it works for me. So,
it's like a boot camp. It's like you're going to sit there and have people just like give you more information than you'll know what to do with. And then if you try to do other things on top of that, there goes the rest of your decisions. And then it's like companies, they want you to work like 80 hours a week doing development. Coding is decision heavy. And
dude, every line is a decision.
Oh my goodness. Like it's like, oh, do I want to use Nmap for the scan, or do I want to use BetterCap, or should I use Redair 2 maybe? No. It's like all these different options. It's like, well, should I use Ghidra? But if I use Ghidra, I can't do it in Fly. And it's like, what?
and then you talk about artificial intelligence and all the algorithms, like Bayes' algorithm that supports artificial intelligence. You think about all those algorithms. It's like, there's so many decisions to make and so many problems to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fun industry. Don't get me wrong. I love the industry that I'm in. I don't necessarily love everybody in it. I don't necessarily love all the practices that take place. And I'll end this on this thought. When I pulled up LinkedIn the other day and I saw somebody posted and they were so happy about the way the community was working because they policed themselves. About the way the community was working because they police themselves.
No.
Please, if you're coming into the community and you're coming to cybersecurity, never do that shit. You're not a policeman. Your morals don't trump somebody else's. If you don't agree with somebody, let it be. Let them go. There's no reason to go publicly and trash somebody for something they did. Just let it go. So, yeah, this has been a great talk, dude. I usually have podcasts for about an hour, maybe a little shy of an hour. This one's gone an hour and 40 minutes, which I think is phenomenal. So I'd like to continue this conversation some other time on another episode. If you'd be willing to come back, I think it would be a great talk, especially talk about some AI and go that route too. So I appreciate you coming on. It's been an honor having you here. Any last thoughts for the listeners or for anybody?
I mean, my main thought is just get out there and start doing something and give credit to your own ideas and just try something, even if your idea might go south, because the best ideas start with letting something go south before you find the good ideas. So try it. Yeah.
And a lot of good ideas happen by accident.
Yes, definitely.
So with that, I'll close it out. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And I wish you the best of luck. And, someday in the future, we should probably do some collaboration. I think that we would probably get along pretty well. So with that, I'll close it out and we'll see you guys next weekend. Thanks.
Hey, welcome back. Mitch Ashley, CTO with Techstrong Group and also principal with Techstrong Research. We are at RSA and kind of taking over a little bit for a little while for Charlene. She'll be back with an episode of Techstrong Women coming up right after this. In the meantime, we have a special edition of CISO Talk. Now, if you've tuned in before, we have a lively panel of experts that operate at the C-level in varying capacities. And we're going to be talking about an interesting topic that I don't think we've touched on before. Before we get to the topic, let's have our folks introduce themselves. If you want to start out, JJ, Jennifer?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Manella, or JJ, founder and principal advisor with Vision Security, where I work with organizations to align the security, people, processes, and strategies with the technical operations teams that are implementing those strategies.
Excellent. And a new guest,
yes.
Allison
Hi.
Miller.
Hi, I'm Allison Miller. I'm CISO and VP of Trust at Reddit. And so there I'm responsible for protecting not just the Reddit platform and its corporate systems, but also protecting users and things like their privacy and their safety on the platform.
Awesome.
So, yeah,
important topic.
Important topic and a fun role.
So we'll have to explore that some more, kind of that expanding role. So I'm excited to hear about Anthony Johnson. Good to see you.
Thank you. Anthony Johnson, founder and managing partner at Delve Risk, market research firm. Like I said, I'm a recovering CISO from a number of Fortune 500 companies. So pleasure to be back.
I think the more responsibility, the more recovering.
Yeah, exactly.
For those roles. So our topic today is the Agile CISO. And we came up with this topic. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are evolving about the CISO roles. Sometimes it's taking on more of IT responsibility, kind of combining CIO, CISO, infrastructure. But I think more recently we've started to recognize that it's not just the operational role of being a CISO anymore. Yes, we still have those things, but it's being more involved in the business, more involved in the strategy, in the execution. Sometimes it's even kind of outsourcing to managed service providers, part of our security and infrastructure. Matter of fact, Matt Newcomb, who's my co-host, is not here today. He's on special assignment. He was talking about how, kind of moving to corporate networks that aren't corporate anymore. They're third party, even at office buildings. And what's the difference of working in an office building versus in a Starbucks? People in and out and all that kind of thing. So our conversation is about this being agile, because it isn't just your technical skills or being able to kind of talk business. So I'm curious, Jennifer, if you want to start us out. You talk and you call yourself an adjacent to the CISO.
Yep. Yeah. I think the CISO role, I don't want to be a recovering CISO. So I've stayed just adjacent to that role. So I've had duties that overlap part of what a CISO does without taking the responsibility of a full CISO role. And I work with CISOs in organizations and sit between them and then non-technical stakeholders, or them and the technical implementers. So CISO adjacent is a good way to describe it. And I think it's been interesting watching over time, because working with the breadth of different types of customers of sizes and industries, from manufacturing to healthcare to people that are just creating software and products. Some of my clients are very heavy on-prem in a legacy infrastructure. So I think of large healthcare organizations that have, not just thousands and tens of thousands of devices and endpoints, but tens of thousands of access points and millions of ports to deal with across the network infrastructure. And then in addition to all of the layers of applications and custom development that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to, some other clients that are, they have basically zero on-prem infrastructure that they're responsible for. So everything is in the cloud. They have office buildings, but the entire building is treated like a public network, basically like if you were at a Starbucks or anywhere else. So, the shift in watching people move from one to the other, or me trying to shift and deal with one and then the other, has been kind of interesting. And it's definitely a learning curve. And it's a completely new set of skill sets. And I think everybody's kind of retooling for how to deal with outsourcing a lot of that and managing those additional people and processes and then contractors.
Interesting. Does any of that resonate with you, Allison, as a practicing CISO? Or you
totally?
So where on that kind of spectrum do you fall? I imagine it's not all on-prem.
Reddit is cloud native, so there's a lot of interest in and acceptance and curiosity about some of these managed services or things that are outsourced, including corporate applications. My most immediate prior experience was at a bank. So also curiosity, but agility in a different way, right? Because those are companies that have a lot of existing investment tied up in data centers and that on-prem technology. And so how can they start to adopt it in a way that feels safe to them? Of course, regulated industries have other things to consider besides their own sort of agility and willingness to experiment. And so going from a Silicon Valley company to a bank, and then to a younger, smaller startup technology company, I've seen a lot of different environments and CISOs try and tackle that challenge using a lot of different tools.
Interesting. By the way, what was your journey to becoming a CISO? How long have you been in that role? I just shouldn't ask how long.
Sure. I've been at Reddit for about 18 months, but this is actually my second CISO gig. And I've kind of jumped around between different types of roles. So I've spent time working as a fraud modeler. I've spent time doing policy analysis, product management in sort of security or anti-abuse related technologies. And then at the bank, I was responsible for building the technology and tools that we use to secure the bank. And so that sort of builder mindset, I think, is what I've sort of brought with me into the CISO role, is that I like standing up programs that protect platforms and people, but I want to build those protections in. And so that's sort of what brought me into this role at Reddit, because it was just a really interesting combination of things I was going to be responsible for. And so that's the other trend, perhaps, in addition to the different types of technologies that CISOs are trying to navigate, the changing nature of what risk means to different companies and what a security executive can bring to those discussions.
Interesting. I know, Anthony, risk is top of mind, something you talk a lot of people about, help them understand, because it's not a static thing.
I think when it comes to organizations, though, what's really fascinating is that I think the business is requiring this more of an agile, business-minded CISO, simply because the demands of what they actually need to grow and survive in this market is shifting. One of my big questions that I think about is whether most of the security leaders today can make that evolution, or if they can even do it at all. It's something like 52% of the CISOs across the Fortune 1000 are actually non-technical, and a good number of those have been with that organization for a long time. So they have, in my view, they have a better opportunity of understanding the business and what's actually necessary to kind of make the shift. Whereas you still have people, myself, I'm a geek, who love to talk about the geek stuff, right? But at the end of the day, that's not going to cut it in 5-10 years anymore, right? Because the business, when you look at user developers, the citizen developer, we have people coming out of college that have more development experience than some of the folks in IT, which is just kind of really interesting. And when you start to get into no code, low code, they're pulling out apps and coming up with ideas that security teams have to figure out. How do we secure this? And the business has been running on it for a year now because it's been such a critical process. So it has to be more business centric. They have to get out of the notion of just more cyber specific tools. So I think that level of agility that's shifting is a big piece of the evolution in that risk conversation.
I like that. It sounds like shining a business-centered flashlight on the shadows of our technical debt is something that a lot of CISOs are getting involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I use this model I talk a lot to is we took the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we actually made it a business hierarchy of needs. And security is not the bottom. It's not the foundation, right? It's revenue, and just like food. And there's aspects of where you need safety and shelter and you all want that, but that's after you get the core aspects of like revenue or food in the regular hierarchy. And when the company's trying to grow, security is awesome, but we have to hit our numbers. We have to hit our expectations. We have shareholders that freak out if not, and a lot of security leaders need to be paying attention to what did the business commit to the street? What's actually in our 10K besides our 4 security statements in there or whatever it is. And we'll see what the evolution looks like, how people keep up.
Interesting. I wonder too about, I think I'm going to throw this out there. I think we should eliminate the term IT because there is no boundary anymore. I mean, it's all happening everywhere in the organization. Don't fight them, join them kind of thing. And let's just be real about it. I also wonder if, in a way, we kind of need to do that with security. It's not network security or corporate security or whatever, trying to protect the organization from itself from doing bad things. We need to have discuss the decided upon level of risk and measures, and those things are going to evolve and change over time because the business isn't static either.
I like the idea of bringing more people into the discussion on technology, for sure. I'm not sure if I'm ready to give up having folks be specialized and be able to go deep on some of those topics. Like securing a desktop is a little bit different than securing a container. And I need folks who can do both. And incident response is a little bit different than those design reviews that we're going to need to do as we better support the business. So I do like the idea of democratizing IT and security and bringing more folks to the table. But I also think that there's something that we can bring into the discussion based on our experience and understanding of risks. I don't think it's necessarily an approach that is natural. It can be learned to be natural. It can be aligned with some of the natural things that finance and marketing do to value, cost benefit analysis of new ventures and such. But I think that there's still sort of a mindset and a piece of the discussion security folks can bring.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite ready to ban it yet. That's a little controversial.
We'll shoot for it.
Yeah. I'm curious, Jennifer, in your adjacent kind of CISO role, I love that term. You shouldn't have told me, because now I'm going to use it all the time. You have to observe, and I imagine a lot of times you're being asked to help work through some of those struggles of how to align with the organization, support the organization, but also manage risk that goes with it. What's sort of the most common things that you see people struggling with in CISO roles?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing, and to me, it's kind of an elephant in the room that a lot of organizations don't talk about, or just kind of as an industry, we don't necessarily talk about in whole, maybe in little pockets. And that's that there's not really a set baseline for what we consider a CISO. And there's been, jokes for the 10 years about the CISO with the little c and a CISO with the big C. And there's organizations that I work with that are very mature and, large, mature organizations have a large, mature security practice, and they have a CISO who can build something and develop something they understand, A to B. They're ready to shift and mold and change and go acquire whatever resources or assets they need to make that happen, or their own knowledge to get there. And they have some level of training to do that, or mentorship, or somebody has helped them do that. And then you have organizations. And so when you look at a lot of the Fortune rated companies, you have these mature systems and peoples and processes. When you look at the rest of the world, of which there are so many, many millions of like mid-market customers, and I don't deal in SMB, but let's just forget about that and stay with mid-market and up. Not everybody has that. And, so, one day I'm working with a CISO who's one of these mature organizations. And, on Tuesday, it might be that the CISO was the web developer last year, or the IT director a couple years, or an application developer, or this or that. And so they come in with this kind of, I hate to call it narrow, but in the grand scheme of what a CISO would be doing, and why I don't consider myself a CISO material, it's a narrow sliver of that. And they know how to build that, and they don't really know how to build the stuff around it and a new program. They don't know which risk models to be using for their organization and to build something from scratch. And so you're in a situation where, you're either forcing somebody to learn something so far outside of what they've ever done before and not necessarily give them the resources to do that. Or you're at the mercy of them specializing and really ratcheting down on the security within the domain that they came from, whatever that was. And so for me, it's been a real struggle because, I'm certainly not an expert across the board with things, but I at least kind of know what I don't know. And, try to steer people towards those resources to go fill in those gaps. But it's, it's certainly an uphill battle for the majority of organizations out there that, they think, okay, well, if we hire somebody who's looking at firewall logs, and that's now our security analyst, and they can report to an IT director or CIO or something, and they don't even have a CISO. They maybe have a compliance officer for whatever their requirements are. And so it's really hard to start, talking to people about how to solve problems technically, and controls and processes and people, when they don't even have the foundation. They're talking about shingles, and there's we haven't cleared the ground to lay the foundation of the house yet. So that's kind of my little soapbox struggle with that.
Your experiences?
Oh, well, I just, as you were talking, one of the things I was thinking about is sometimes when I'm talking to folks, they're like, oh, you have such a non-traditional path to becoming a CISO. I think it's been a great path because I've been cross-training across all of these disciplines: product management, engineering, fraud detection, enterprise cybersecurity, policy analysis. All of those things have really helped me. And sort of one of the things that you kind of kicked off the conversation about was, what about these technologies that we might not have on-prem, that we might outsource? If there are safe, we feel comfortable, risk-managed ways to push some of those things out, those become almost commodified components of our security program. That frees us up to do the much more interesting work of better aligning with the business. So I understand what you're describing, because I've seen that too. There's a lot of folks who they kind of grow in a vertical line, and then their security program is very strong where they are strong. And what kind of resources does the industry have to help grow our leaders? Because I don't know that individual companies would know how to do that. Yeah.
I think that when I think about security leaders today, I actually draw a lot of parallels to partners at a law firm, right? You might be a partner at a law firm, but you are not a contracts master in law, contracts law and HR law and housing law. I mean, there's so many different aspects of law, and security is like that today, where it's impossible to actually understand at a super granular level the nuance of how all of these technologies are going to come in to just make this one amazing masterpiece. And so people do index on, I have a lot of experience in red teaming and incident response. So let me focus on that for a little bit, and then let me get somebody who's maybe good enough here. And the organizations that can afford that are the very mega companies with hundreds of millions of dollars of budget. And maybe they do have very, very highly technical experts in line of business or functional CISOs that they've kind of commandeered out. But when you start to get to the mid-market, SMB, even below the Fortune 700, it is very, very difficult for them to compete, not even just on budget-wise, talent-wise. I mean, over the last year, you're seeing compensations shift. People leaving a role, coming back to the old company and getting 40, 50% up on base compensation, right? Like, that's almost impossible. And then you overlay the fact that vendor software is not getting less expensive, right? They're innovating in new ways. So I need this. Oh, now we got to do this. Okay, now if I'm looking at securing GCP, I need a different solution versus securing Azure versus AWS. Like, it's this really, really just this growing landscape that I think security leaders have to figure out, how do they step back and be a law partner and say, okay, we have the right people, focus on the right areas, and I can present the broader risk context to the rest of the leadership team that literally has no hope of ever trying to explain and understand the evolving landscape. So I think that's where the agility and the evolution of the security leader is kind of shifting towards in my mind as well.
Yeah, I have a huge amount of compassion for the medium-sized business,
Absolutely.
both technical, IT, and CISO security organizations, because in some ways they're expected to meet many, if not most, of the same requirements as larger enterprises. But without the budget, without the people, without the infrastructure, you just don't have that size.
Security is funny because it scales up. Like, the bigger that you get, you have sort of a baseline and you can make incremental improvements, but it doesn't scale down. So the requirements space sort of stays the same no matter what shape or size enterprise or company or entity you are. And so it's kind of promising that some of these tools there's a wider variety of tools and services available, and they have different pricing schemes. Tools, you're probably more of an expert in this than I am, but we're looking at tools that are charging based on data throughput, right? Or number of employees. Some technologies charge that way. And so that's helpful for the mid-market, but their requirements suite is not diminished, even though their budget is.
There are vendors, I won't list them out, who will not sell the solution unless it's a minimum of 10,000 users, right? Which is just a really interesting conversation of all right, so you have this entire market of people who want to buy this solution. Yeah, but we're focused here, so we're not going to break down our strategy and do that. But you also have companies, they're Fortune 1000 companies, the entirety of their cybersecurity budget, including headcount and OpEx, is sub $3 million, right? That is insane, right? And so they're sitting there on, massive aspects of revenue, really tight margins because of the business they're in. And those security teams you get 3 people, $3 million, make sure we never show up, right? In this breach. And you're like, good luck, buddy. I have no clue what to tell you. Hopefully you find some great partners that will give you some discounts here.
I want to argue the other side of that, though. So
Please.
Because, again, sitting between organizations and a lot of the vendors, including a lot of managed services for everything from entire managed outsourced networks to managed detection and risk and manage this and manage that, is I feel like I kind of applaud a vendor that understands where their solution is best positioned, whether it's, size or industry or combination of size and industry, because I don't necessarily think every solution is appropriate for every size organization. And there's certainly, a suite of products that I wouldn't put with an organization that didn't have, in fact, we talked about this earlier in a panel today, like if the organization doesn't have the people to manage that appropriately, control is only as good as the implementation of it and the care and feeding that you give it. And if you don't have the people, and if they've determined, and maybe they haven't, I'm just guessing, but if they've determined that, okay, what we think is on average, a company this size will have at least XYZ, that's the bare minimum to make this work. I do applaud that.
I think Marcus' focus is great. In that particular situation, it's more of
that's not the driver.
A gate.
Okay.
It's a gate because they don't want to fragment their sales team, and which I totally get from hitting that.
The allocation is better best use of their resources.
It's the best use of their resources, but when you look across the SMBs, right? Like, man, the only answer I see for SMBs is really to partner with MSSPs and those providers that can do things at scale. And have those partnerships with where they ratchet up to, we've now got 10,000 people that can do this. So now can I use this, which would replace all this other less efficient solution set. So I think our ecosystem probably needs a little tweaking to kind of.
There's so much value though in outsourcing things. I mean, I've done a lot of like real world ROI analysis because the vendors all make up their little sheet.
Somehow it always works out in their favor,
they're so cute. Yeah,
what a coincidence.
But I'll tell you that for a couple, I did my own, and one of them was basically an outsourced SOC as a service, a full managed detection response, and it had different components to it. So I started this with several different organizations of different sizes, different industries, et cetera, and started kind of adding up and saying, okay, based on what you have now, here's like a 3-year plan or sometimes a 5-year plan. And these are the people that you would need in the order that you would need them, and the average based on where you're located, the salary, et cetera, et cetera. And, the scale, like you said, it scales up. It doesn't necessarily scale down. And it's an unbelievable expense just to get 24/7 coverage to have a SOC with just even basic junior level analyst, and not even necessarily a SOC manager, not an incident response team, not somebody doing forensics, not all of these other things you still have to go outsource somehow. That barrier to entry is just so high for organizations that SMBs absolutely don't have a prayer there.
Good stuff. So let me kind of check altimeter, and I want to take the conversation in this direction. It seems like we're asking a lot of CISOs if we want you to be more strategic, more dynamic, more agile, be aligned with the business, understand the business, which I think are all important and agree with. At the same time, like I'm giving a talk on API security, and what my talk is about is to kind of equip security people with some software language knowledge about DevOps and Agile and cloud native and where all these APIs are coming from. So now all of a sudden, as a CISO, you're being asked to secure APIs. You're like, well, okay, REST is a protocol. HTTP. It's a little more involved in that. So where I'm going with this is the landscape is getting bigger of challenges of technologies and kind of problems to include in the security. How do we deal with that? At the same time, we're trying to be more forward-looking and helping the business achieve what its goals are, not be the land of no. No, don't do that because it's not secure. We can't secure it.
Well, one way that I'm sort of approaching that is a lot of my security engineers are software developers. They're sort of engineers first, and we do a lot of cross-training with our partner teams. So, for example, we have a really awesome SRE team, and the security team cross-trains with them so that they all have sort of a similar approach to incident management, and they all know each other and can coordinate if something happens. So this idea that security is exotic and away from the business and is removed from. I work for a software company, so is removed from the actual guts of how the business works. We're sort of breaking down those silos a bit because, in truth, I don't know if I can outsource a SOC, because for someone to actually respond, they might have to go into code. They might need to know, which engineer, or at least which engineering team to kind of pull onto the line. And that's just something that it kind of requires being on the ground with that team and having those relationships. So it's hard for me to imagine outsourcing that. Although I love the idea of having it, having some burst capacity there. But that's sort of how we're thinking about it, and an approach that I've seen be successful elsewhere as well.
So at this very table, last time we did these interviews, 2020, one of the things that I said was, security people, go learn something about software architecture. You don't have to become a software expert, cloud native expert. But that's that, if you don't have those skills, go acquire it, right?
Right.
Especially as we do more software automation around security infrastructure. But I'm not saying that I was right, but I was right.
So let me spin this a different way, because
Okay.
I feel like we're saying, okay, it's the CISO's job or that team's job to take, the business requirements and translate them and then communicate them down. I feel like that hasn't been working for us. And so again, kind of sitting between the CISO and the teams doing the work, a lot of times what happens is these architects and administrators it's not communicated down to them. The end result of I need you to do this is communicated to them, but a lot of times why and the conversation of how those architects and those other individual contributors or teams they're not given the opportunity to participate in it. And so I think that there are these kind of almost horizontal silos of layers where, the people that could contribute to that conversation to some degree, and probably not everybody, but some people definitely could contribute to that conversation. And a lot of organizations are not given that opportunity. And, and frankly, that's probably why I have a job. So, but it is a gap. And I feel like if the business could trickle down to a little bit closer to the feet on the street and the hands on the keyboards, and they understand, then you have that many more people advocating for whatever that business requirement or suite of requirements is, that can then feed back up to the CISO or their managers or the CTO team, and especially through digital transformation projects, and be able to say, okay, well, we understand this, and we understand you told us to do this, but here's this other better way to do it, or a more secure way to do it, or a more efficient or efficacious way to do it. And I just feel like that I know there are corner cases where there's some uber amazing communication up and down, but I think that is the exception, not the rule. And I think we have to stop putting this sort of choke point with the CISO to be that person or that team to do that.
They're the translation gate.
Yeah, I feel like we can do that further down.
So here's something I struggle with, though, right? And now I have the luxury of having, like I said, been a recovering CISO to now building a software company. And what I find that's really, really fascinating, and this has held true throughout my entire career, a lot of security leaders, they might know the business, but they don't know how the business makes money, right? Or they've never actually spoken to a customer, right? So when I was at the bank, I would talk to other security leaders. They're like, oh yeah, we're a bank, we do these things. I'm like, well, how do we make money? And they wouldn't actually understand the nuances of how trades were transacted, or how we actually would handle and convert off of currency. And like, these things are really, really important because arguably the other business heads do know how they make money. And so they have a different view of risk of like, hey, we got to hit this target. But what the security leaders and technologist leaders are really good at is, I can secure a network, but they have to know, I think they have to have a deeper appreciation and understanding of why we're securing the network. And as a, building software now, I find myself doing things that I'm like, man, Anthony 4 years ago would totally kill me for doing this right now. Like, there's no way I would have let this slide.
I would stop myself.
Right? But when I go back to, I would totally have stopped myself. But then I would go back and be like, all right, but if I don't do this, then the company's not going to grow. And then we're not going to have a business to secure. Right? So it's a little bit, I guess I have a little bit of a different view on it a bit.
What you're saying resonates with me, and it's why I tend to pick roles where I can be part of the business. I don't like being in a situation where it's like, oh, the business needs this, the business is resistant. I'm the business, I'm part of the business. We were very intentional when we were naming my role. So I'm the CISO and VP of Trust It could have also been a VP of risk, right? It's a lot about sort of product risk and some regulatory risk, some of the other things that we're dealing with. But I wanted it to be trust because I wanted it to be clear that we are bringing value to the business and we're making the product better, we're making the business better. But I also agree with JJ. The why and the how are both very important. And the why, I think, if we have CISOs who are good business minded, such that they can kind of speak the language of their colleagues, the why kind of works itself out, but the rubber meets the road with the how. And so I hope that my teams are empowered that most of the how can be decided upon, and that I would only need to get involved, or management only needs to get involved when there's a disagreement that can't be worked out by those folks who are actually our hands on keyboards.
Yeah. But they have to understand the big picture instead of the directive. And I think that's where, and I mean, just knowing you for a long time, I imagine you do a wonderful job of that. But I think that's where I see so many of the challenges is, so for example, when I was at this is anecdotal, but I was at a conference for, very technical people in networking and wireless. And with my new book, I address, risk and compliance and how to align network security configurations with that. And, one of the things I shared with them is, sometimes if somebody's not compliant, organization's not compliant, that's a choice. And there might be a fine, and there's just a line item in the budget for that fine. And that just blows some people's mind that are technical. Mm-hmm. And so it's that, the big picture, what are we trying to do instead of the directive of do this configuration, when probably the person telling them, and I'm being a little silly here with the specific configuration, but they get them some narrow directive. This person doesn't understand the ramifications of that specific directive necessarily. And then the person who's doing it doesn't understand what the intent was. So intent-based strategy.
Yeah, right. I remember at one of my previous organizations, we were talking about something, and the answer that came back was, well, let them sue us. We've got thousands of attorneys, and by the time this gets anywhere, they'll probably be out of business. And it was just this oh, okay, big bank takes little bank kind of conversation. I guess that's what we're going to do.
Things aren't
and
equal
we just
fair.
And we just moved on, right? And it was a real big piece for me to be but the compliance, and it was none of it mattered. Let them sue us. That's fine. That's why we have 1,000+ attorneys.
I worked construction when I was a teenager, and one of the phrases that struck me that way was good enough for who it's for. And that was the customer decides what the expectations are. The business decides what it needs. Kind of same idea. I think this idea of Agile CISO is an Agile leader. That's really what it is. 'Cause it's not just you being Agile, it's your organization. It's giving the context, helping with most of my staff meetings, 3/4 of it is why. Here's what's happening in the business. This is what I know about that might help inform you with what's happening, because you're being asked to do A, B, and C, and you're like, why is A important? I'm fine with the others. So it's helping our organization, because I remember you're going to Cisco Live, I think, to another conference. And I remember back in early 2011 or so, my top network engineer said, I'm going to the Cisco conference. What should I go check out? And I said, Python. And he said, what's that? And I said, Python. He said, it's all going to be software. All these boxes you're buying, most of them are going to change. They're not going to be what they are now, because I just got done working on products doing that. And so our role is to help bring people into the paradigm shift that we can help with and help them be agile. So we've got the team with us. Yeah. So we're bringing in software people when we need software help and expertise. Anyway, that I don't know if that's consistent with.
No, I love that. You're talking about agility in terms of adaptation, right? Because what a company needs from a security leader kind of depends on the company, as well as what that leader's skill set or sort of preferences are. And I also smile when I hear your description, because I love innovation. So for me, being an Agile CISO means being an Agile leader, but also one who is probably going to end up changing how things work in order to make them work better.
You have to thrive on change, I think, to
Absolutely.
be a leader these days.
Yes.
So let's do this. I think we're kind of getting close on our time here. How about this as our parting thought? What do you think is from a CISO mindset, when you come to RSA this year, and we're back in person and a lot of things have changed, some things haven't. What do you think that question that people are trying to answer? It doesn't have to be the same question. We all have different perspectives. What's the questions that they're trying to answer by coming to RSA? You want to start, Anthony?
I think that this is a little bit different. RSA is different this year, particularly because they spent the last 2 years getting information, invites, just data stuff thrown at them. And so a lot of security leaders are like, hey, is this still a good network relationship building opportunity? And that's why every restaurant is slammed. Every venue is booked. Coffee shops are booked out because security leaders and practitioners are they're networking and doing a lot of that catch-up pieces here. Like, I think the time of going to a conference and saying, I know nothing about that topic anymore, I think we're kind of past that. That's going to be more the exception. So I think they're looking for, how am I continuing to build relationships? How am I networking? And is this going to be a good use of time from that perspective? Because the reality is, any security leader can get all the information about any vendor, either through their Gartner subscriptions, partners, friends, whomever it is, and vendors will fly their
research.
Yeah, exactly, right? Everyone. So I think it's about the networking pieces here.
Shameless plug. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the past I might have thought that CISOs were coming to RSA to figure out what was the newest, coolest silver bullet foundry and bring a shopping list and figure out what can I buy to solve my problems. And I think that there's a little bit of silver bullet exhaustion, maybe. We're very aware that we can keep buying tools and solutions, and it doesn't necessarily help us really manage our risks. So now I think CISOs are coming to say, who else has my problems? And how are they solving them? Because maybe it is a tool or a technology, or maybe it's a process, or maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's a way of working. And so I think that's kind of what's on CISOs' minds now. They want to focus in on the problems that are really hard for them to solve.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's why there are so many birds of a feather roundtable sessions. And I think those are awesome because they're peer. I'm facilitating one this week, but that's where, 20 or 30 people come together. It's not a presentation. They get to kumbaya or not really kumbaya, but they're going to kind of discuss, with their peers, what their problem is and how they've solved it or not solved it. But I think, probably 72% of the CISOs that are here are trying to figure out what zero trust is.
Still, yeah, I agree with that. Low.
My completely unofficial survey results there on that.
It's kind of pretty accurate.
I think it's accurate. Yeah, 72.6, but I was rounding down.
Oh, good. Thanks for kind of sparing us from the 0.6. What's interesting is I worked in a research at an industry consortium, and a lot of the engagements were not as big as RSA, but I did learn that the higher you go in an organization, especially a bigger organization, kind of the lonelier it gets. The amount of people you can sort of really open up to and talk about your insecurities. I don't know this, what's going on. Am I doing the right thing? Is my strategy right? Are we going the right direction? You can ask that question in some ways to vendors and to colleagues, but you want to talk to people who are wrestling with similar maybe they're not wrestling with the same problems. They've already solved it, or how they're going about it. And the other is that the executives, the boards of their organizations, they're asking them two questions. What's on the forefront that can harm us? What's on the forefront that can help us? Because I don't want to miss either. I don't want to get hit by something. I also don't want to miss the next Uber, the next Airbnb, the next whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, we lost a big opportunity to transform our business and, become the next thing we need to become. So it is that sort of raised periscope, being able to take a look and then connect. It's not just human connection. That's all nice. It's good to get together again. But it is that interpersonal conversation. How about a parting thought? Allison, if you want to kick us off with if I was going to advise the Agile CISO, what would you impart to them?
If I was going to advise the Agile CISO, or let's just say the new CISO, I think that folks come into a new gig or maybe are at their gig and they think about technology, team, and culture. And a lot of us who are in the CISO seat, we're nerds, so we focus in on the technology. But it's actually culture that is really going to be the game changer and whether you kind of win or lose at the game you're playing.
Yeah.
I would say get out there and actually meet your business partners, like meet the other business leaders, and not just once a quarter, right? Like find a time, find a reason to listen to what they're actually working on, what their expectations are for that quarter, for that month. Because I think there's a lot of security leaders who kind of get sucked into the tech bubble of where they just talk to the CIOs, CTO, and they don't actually ever really talk to the business and say, oh, you have to grow your footprint by 30% and expand retail locations to this to hit these numbers. And that means blah, 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 right? And so I would say really get out there and meet those business partners in a meaningful way.
Good advice. Jennifer?
I think for the sake of shifting gears and not being repetitive, like, I agree with both of my panelists over here because that's boring.
A violent agreement on everything.
I think there's two things, and that's that, I think that the CISO shouldn't be, or any professional really, but especially a technical or security professional should not be expected and expect themselves to know everything. It is fine to ask questions. It is fine to say, I don't know. It is fine to say there's a problem I don't know how to solve. It's fine to ask peers. It's fine to ask, I think, anybody about those things. I know some stuff is sensitive, but for the most case, having people you trust to go to for those types of things, to ask those questions and help solve the problems. And then I'll also just throw out like a tool that I've recently stumbled on that I like a lot. Whereas if you did come from one of those kind of siloed domain areas and you feel like you have some blind spots, I'm really digging Sunil's Cyber Defense Matrix. So there's a book, you can get it on ebook, and they're giving them away here as well. But it's really nice because it takes kind of the NIST concept from that framework and makes it really easy and consumable to use. It talks about like left of boom, right of boom, and breaks down the 5 different assets and the 5 different, like detect, respond, et cetera.
Process.
Yeah. And so it's nice. You can't just glance at it. You need to read the definitions because they're not what you would think they would be. But it's a great way to kind of, I think, evaluate yourself as a professional to see where you tend to cluster your attention, and then to kind of fill that out a little bit, make sure that you have the people, the processes, and the products to address each of those, whichever of those squares are relevant to your business model and your architecture. I think that's a great kind of easy, like a 2-hour exercise to get some visibility into your blind spots. I think that's cool.
He was just here in neon green pants.
He was walking by.
So,
did he really?
Yeah, that's what I was waving at. I was
he knew I was talking about him.
That's subliminal. He planned that all the time. So you would mention
But neon green pants. Like they were neon green.
By the way, you're a newly minted author. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your book and how we can get it?
Okay, so my first book I co-authored with other people. So this is my first book by myself. It's Wireless Security Architecture, but I think I kind of alluded to earlier. It walks any networking professional or any IT professional. Barrier of entry is like you need like network plus level knowledge, but it walks them through understanding kind of security mindset, risk, compliance, who needs to be doing what in the organization, what to do if you don't have those people in your organization, how to make some gut instinct calls if you don't have a CISO, for example. And then it gets into the nitty-gritty details of how the protocol specifications work, when to use what. And when Wi-Fi specifically, we have new security suite that's WPA3. It talks about, there's a lot of opportunity to make that fail miserably. So there's a lot of conversation around how to get there. It's meant to have a shelf life of 5 years, so it's broader than very specific things. And then in the back is where I threw all of the stuff that won't live the life of the book. So there's stuff about zero trust and BYOD and remote workforce, and quite a bit about non-Wi-Fi wireless, including private cellular, which is an emergent use case for enterprises, and some other IoT and industrial automation stuff.
Really smart. Build in some obsolescence. So you can have a second and a third edition.
There we go. Yes.
Way to go. So my parting thought would be, go learn the business. Yeah. Spend a day in the warehouse, unpack a truck, go stand next to a teller or the teller window, go mow a lawn or whatever it is you do. Go, irrigate the golf course. Whatever your company is, truck roll, to do install of a network at someone's home, there's nothing like being in the field, and do it more than just once. Don't just do it the first week or first 6 months of your job. Every quarter, every once in a while, go back out and learn a different part of the job. Go sit down with finance people and sit through their team meeting and their presentation, what they're going to take to the board or to the CEO. Learn the business, because how can you secure what you don't understand? Right? It's all being
Mitch,
part of it. Yeah.
instead of Undercover Boss, should we have a TechStrong TV series that's Undercover CISO, where the CISO goes undercover in the business and takes on a different role?
So like a Tom Cruise kind of movie, Top Gun Maverick-ish kind of thing?
I like it.
Yeah, that's a great movie, by the way. I think it's a great idea.
I haven't seen it yet, but yes, I'll watch the movie.
Oh, you got to see that.
Such a good reality show.
And,
Yeah, wouldn't it though?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, have you seen Undercover Boss?
Yeah,
Okay,
I have. There's some interesting episodes. Yes, I have. There's some really good ones. Well, there's no litmus test, but Allison, you're now a member. You're part of the team.
All right.
So you have to come back now. You don't
Okay.
have a choice. Good crew. Anthony, good to be with us. Jennifer, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us for this special edition of CISO Talk. As you can tell, we're trying to grapple ourselves with what those challenges are and help each other with ideas and experiences that we're having. We hope that's been useful to you. Definitely want you to stick around. Our next segment is going to be TechStrong Women with Charlene O'Hanlon, and she's going to be hosting some very special conversation about women in tech. So don't go away. Stay tuned. Same bat channel, same bat station. We'll see you in a bit.
Awesome. Thank you.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right, welcome back to TechStrong TV Live at RSA Conference here in San Francisco. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I've been having so many great conversations today. I wish you were here to hear these conversations, but I'm glad you're tuning in to see them virtually. We have another great conversation coming up. This one is with Loris Dejiani. I got it.
Very good.
So excited. Loris is the CTO and co-founder over at Sysdig, and you guys are firmly in the cloud native Kubernetes containers space, correct?
Correct. So Sysdig offers a full feature security platform, which is essentially the leading platform for security for modern applications that run in the cloud. In particular, we focus on cloud infrastructure security, container and Kubernetes security, and everything that has to do with the life cycle and securing the life cycle of modern applications that are running on the cloud.
Excellent, excellent. And I've been having so many conversations with folks about cloud native technologies, and it's really fascinating to me because the collective cloud native community, seem to be focusing a lot on the application development, not so much on the application security of cloud native applications. So where do you see the space right now?
I think it's changing. It's changing quickly. Talking about cloud native, I was at KubeCon in Valencia a couple of weeks ago, not too long ago, and it was interesting for me to notice how even in a conference that is typically, DevOps oriented, there were a lot of conversations about security. There was a lot of interest. I think it's like phases, right? Initially, you need to figure out your stack. So you care more about, which technology do I pick? How do I get my team out to speed with this technology? How do I get the right resources lined up and so on? And then, when people start actually using these and maybe using it in production is like, oh, okay, my sensitive data is relying on this. My applications and the health of these applications and the security of the applications relies on this. So there's a second way when people sort of, realize how important this is, and they start making true investment. And that's what I'm seeing it's happening around this phase.
Well, that's good. I mean, that to me, that shows that there's a real maturation happening. The market is maturing. The whole cloud native community is really coming into its own, if you will, and recognizing that, it's not just about the units, if you will, the containers or Kubernetes or service mesh or, all of the different cloud native technologies. Really have to look at it holistically. And security needs to be a larger part of that conversation. So, and as part of that, I imagine you guys are talking a little bit more, maybe hopefully, about API security as part of that as well. So, I mean, where do you kind of see that coming into the conversation?
Yeah, API security, and I mean, it's really like, a chain that is made of many rings, right? Sure. And you need to make sure if only one of these rings is weak, then your whole posture is weak. So, really, especially in the cloud, because very often, at least for what I'm exposed to, Sysdig tends to talk to users, both open source and commercial users. They tend to be typically either at the beginning or in the middle of a digital transformation. And the transformation is the transformation to the cloud, right? Using cloud native technologies is essentially a tool to transition applications that were living in the data center traditionally, and now they're living in the cloud. And there are many aspects to that. There's API security, there's shiftless security, and like code security and container image security. There's vulnerability management. There's runtime security, which is very important. There's security postures. There's forensics. And what's interesting is that the transition to the cloud is radical enough that all of this changes in a quite dramatic way, in a way that not only typically what you are doing in the past doesn't work anymore because the paradigm is so different, but also that if you approach this too much vertically, then you are not really covered. So for sure, API security and many other things are sort of, like converging, and we're seeing even just in terms of community, the Cloud Native Foundation, becoming a little bit like the certifier for what the proper stack should be for this.
And it's amazing to me to see how attitudes are changing toward cloud native technologies. And I think when we first started talking about containers, everybody thought, well, they've got to be secure because they're stateless. Why wouldn't they be secure?
Nothing is happening inside them.
And that has been the biggest fallacy. We've all learned that is so incorrect. That and I think a lot of companies maybe learned a hard lesson that way. But we are, the more we understand the technology and the way that the components all work together, I think the better we understand that security really does need to be a very large part of the conversation. And as I said before, kind of holistic part of the conversation.
Yeah. And one thing that you are exactly right. At the beginning it was like, okay, containers isolate the different components of the application. So, now everything is secure and everything is immutable. I don't need security anymore. In practice, security actually risk, because security is about reducing risk. You cannot remove risk, right? You only reduce it. And risk largely is determined by complexity, right? So what happens with modern cloud-based orchestrated infrastructures is that, yes, the single components are more secure. And I strongly believe that, these modern infrastructures in the end are more secure than the traditional ones. But they also had a large degree of complexity. Just because our infrastructures now are distributed, are multi-service, are based on CI/CD pipelines, because today we want to release every day, not twice a year.
Right.
And this adds a bunch of moving parts. This adds complexity, and this adds much more places where the human factor can cause issues from the point of view of, I don't know, leaking credentials, of forgetting an S3 bucket open,
Right.
of misconfiguring access to your Kubernetes cluster, this kind of stuff. So we're getting more and more powerful in the way we deliver applications, but we're also getting more complex, and that means we need to be more careful about security because there's more chances to do something wrong that could be very damaging for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So where do you see the space heading then?
First of all, again, my personal perspective and the perspective of SysDig is the perspective of somebody that is really essentially working on a daily basis with companies that are at the bleeding edge of this, you know. So what I see is definitely an explosion, you know, an acceleration. There's an acceleration in general toward everything that is cloud, which was driven in the last couple of years by macro dynamics like the pandemic and so on, where more and more essentially, you know, software for in any industry, any vertical is your primary element of competition, and more being essentially up to date and modern in the way you deliver software, and therefore you interact with your user and your customers is more and more important. This has brought to essentially an explosion, not only in essentially transition to moving to the cloud, because the cloud gives you more elasticity to be able to deal with these new challenges in the global market, but it also gives you, you know, like the ability to adopt an infrastructure that is well architected at the fundamental level by the cloud providers. Now, this is more and more driven by modern technologies like Kubernetes is really becoming I call it the operating system of the cloud, right? Yeah. Because the same way Linux was scheduling processing on a single machine, Kubernetes schedules services on a distributed infrastructure. Right. So more and more adoption of modern technologies, and talking about security because we are at RSA, more and more awareness of having to approach from the security point of view in the correct way the problem of modern security, and this is evolving on a daily basis. Essentially, service meshes, agentless, everything that has to do with runtime security and real-time security in cloud. These are all areas that are essentially we are discovering and evolving now as we're speaking.
Are those the conversations that you're having with your customers? You know, what seems to be kind of their biggest pain points when it comes to security and
very much so. In a general way, when transition to the cloud, in many cases, is just okay. You know, first of all, we need to start from the basis. Yeah. We need to get visibility on what is running, which teams, which people, which resources, and so on, which services we're using from the cloud providers. Many organizations are still struggling at this level, you know, especially with something like cloud that very often grows bottom up, you know, in an organization. It's like, okay, it's great that teams are embracing this, that we are more agile, that we can deliver our software faster, but we don't even know, you know, do we have something running in Europe, in AWS, or I don't know, in South America, in Azure, you know, this kind of stuff. And then, of course, so gaining visibility is currently step number one and priority number one. And then it's like, okay, there's two things that at that point I see people want to do. One is make sure that the software delivery pipeline is secured, and that means the so-called shift left security, right? So go more and more toward the code. For example, a new trend that I'm seeing that is very, very top of mind for CISOs right now is infrastructure as code security, right? Because every infrastructure in the cloud is declared as a piece of software in a declarative way. It's on GitHub. It's JSON, it's YAML, it's Python, and so on. So there's really a chance to go and treat essentially your infrastructure and the way your infrastructure is declared as a piece of code that can be secured with shift left paradigms. You can help with customers. For example, we have a product that is able to scan infrastructures. First of all, find them, on GitHub or GitLab and so on, scan them and open pull requests automatically to increase compliance or remove risk and this kind of stuff. The other side is that is symmetric is, okay, now that my stuff, I protect it while I build it essentially. What happens when it runs?
Right.
And, everybody talks about shiftless security. Not many people talk about shift-right security. But that's equally important, because in complex environments, when something changes, when somebody's able to get your credentials and get in your infrastructure, when data is exfiltrated, you really need to know right away, so as fast as possible, and take action. And we were talking before about the chain and not having weak links. More and more, these two things are treated together, because what you learn at runtime can inform you on how you can improve things in your build pipeline, and vice versa. Maybe the vulnerabilities that you find in the pipeline allow you to fix things in a more responsive way at runtime. And this is a cycle.
That makes total sense. Total sense. And, I think we've seen a greater number of companies move to cloud native infrastructure and cloud native applications. And I think as they move forward, they understand that there are a lot of complexities involved in securing these environments and securing environments that are both, hybrid, multi-cloud, cloud native. There's a lot there, and it can be very difficult to kind of wrap your brain around. So I really think simplicity is going to be the key moving forward. And so any way that we can help the developers do their job better, and security being a part of that process, I think is going to be very, very well received. So, Loris, I want to thank you for coming and having this conversation with me. It's great stuff. You guys are doing really awesome stuff in the cloud native space. So
thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. So, all right, everybody, we have got 2 panel discussions coming up. First of all, we've got CISO talks coming up, I believe, at 2:30 Eastern. And then after that, we have a Tech Strong Women panel discussion coming up at 3:30 p.m. Pacific. And so we will, I think I said 2:30 Eastern. I meant 2:30 Pacific, and then 3:30 Pacific. So please do stay tuned for both of them. And we're going to take a quick break. And then like I said, we'll be back at 2:30 with CISO Talk.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Cam SG, who's Chief Strategy Officer for Lightbit Labs. They just picked up $42 million in funding to drive the next wave of cloud storage. Cam, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
We've had cloud storage for a while, and of course, there are new technologies coming down the pike, but why do we need a new platform, and what's different about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so what we provide is a high-performance block storage service that can be used in cloud infrastructure that can be either internal clouds in an on-prem environment or with cloud service providers, whether they're big public cloud providers or sort of the edge providers. And the idea here is to make high-performance disaggregated storage simple, agile, and efficient. If you think about the different ways storage is being used in the cloud today, you have solutions out there that are disaggregated and are software defined, but they don't quite meet the performance requirements of today's native cloud database applications. On the other hand, if customers end up using direct attached storage to be able to get to high performance, they end up wasting a lot of storage capacity because you don't have high utilization of your storage infrastructure in that way. What we've done is we've come up with a model where you can have disaggregated storage, which means pooling all your storage together in a way that can be shared across all the application servers and in the cloud. And at the same time, give performance that's equivalent to local flash. So we can be used for high performance database and analytic workloads that are latency sensitive. And at the same time, give much better utilization of the infrastructure, which means lower cost and data services. It's a very long answer to your question, but it is our solution was designed from the beginning for the cloud model, but for applications that need very high performance.
Is it your sense that more of those applications would be moving into the cloud now because of this kind of technology is available? I mean, we've had block storage forever and the databases have run on premise and largely for the reasons you point out, latency. But is NVMe and block storage going to make it easier to move those applications into the cloud, or do you think they'll still run primarily on premise?
No, I think they are moving to the cloud, and what we provide. If you go back to how Lightbit started, we knew that we want to focus on cloud disaggregated storage, and initially our focus was on private clouds and edge clouds. And the first thing we did was we invented a new protocol called NVMe over TCP that allows NVMe to provide disaggregated storage on top of existing Ethernet TCP/IP network infrastructure. So that was a big step forward, just to be able to make it as easy and efficient as possible to provide disaggregated storage on existing infrastructure that the cloud is using. Not RDMA infrastructure or fiber channel, but just Ethernet TCP/IP, vanilla Ethernet TCP/IP. And after we created this new protocol and worked with the help of Intel and Facebook and others, we got it standardized. Then we came out with the first production solution around this and added data services, added resiliency and high availability to the solution. So now it's a complete storage solution. It has been for the last few years that is deployed across on-prem as well as cloud service provider infrastructure. Now that this is available, and by the way, NVMe over TCP is a part of the NVMe over Fabrics standard. It's basically another transport option. Now that it is available, it makes it much more efficient to run these high performance database applications in the cloud. Today, if you look at what's available, high performance cloud storage is expensive and it's complicated. You have many different options that you need to look at, and then depending on the workload requirements, you pick the right option. What ends up happening is if you go with the highest performance option with other solutions that are out there, you pay a lot for that service. Whereas with Lightbits, you can get to much better TCO, much better price performance for those high performance applications. And our customers can get the same consistent experience, whether they run Lightbits on-prem or in the edge or in the public cloud. Now, our public cloud offering is not out yet, but it is about to come out. We are doing a release, which is for early customers next month. And so we'll keep you posted on updates on that. It's not something we're announcing today, but it is about to be released. And that would be a Lightbits on AWS offering, and we'll follow with other public cloud offerings, so with the big hyperscalers.
Do you think as time goes on, we'll see more of these applications running in a hybrid mode then as a result? Would I have it more distributed, or do you think that because of latency issues, they'll either run in the cloud or they'll run on premise, but they won't be as loosely coupled? How far can we get?
That's a great question. We see a lot of different models. I think for sure, for the big enterprises that have a certain amount of data, once you reach a certain critical mass, there are economic advantages to having your own internal data center. And when I say internal data center, it can still be a cloud model on-prem, where you are doing software-defined everything. Your infrastructure can support multiple applications. It's very agile and flexible. The same thing that the big cloud providers are doing, but it's done internally for the internal customers that that enterprise has. So there are economic reasons for continuing with on-prem cloud infrastructure. But then those same enterprises would like to be able to expand their infrastructure rapidly and use the public cloud for that, or in certain geographies, they don't have data centers and they want to use the public cloud for that. So they'd like to get the same experience on-prem and in the public cloud. And that is one hybrid model where their data resides in both environments and their processing is also done in both environments, but they're looking for a unified and consistent experience. Then you have some other customers that are born in the cloud and they're entirely in the cloud, so they're not quite hybrid. They may have small data center internal deployments, but it's mostly in the cloud. And we're seeing some other examples of edge cloud providers or some tier 2 CSPs, cloud service providers, that actually provide infrastructure for the storage that then works with a multi-cloud environment. And they essentially are removing any sort of lock-in that one of the big public cloud vendors would have by expanding to a multi-cloud environment. So there's many different options out there. The way Lightbit started, as our focus was initially on private clouds and edge clouds, and now we're having Lightbits available on AWS, and soon after that on Azure. So our goal is to make high-performance cloud data storage very simple and efficient, and at the same time allow our customers to get the same type of experience and high-performance block storage service on either of these deployment options. The other thing that we've done is we have spent a lot of time building an ecosystem around NVMe over TCP and developing our solution alongside various different application environments that are commonly used for both containerized applications with Kubernetes, virtualized applications with VMware, also with OpenStack, so that from an application point of view, it's very easy to basically run on top of the Lightbit's cloud data platform and get this high-performance block storage service with a user experience that's very familiar to them from a management and orchestration perspective.
Will I need your traditional storage administrator in this new era, or is the cloud essentially just another resource that I'm invoking through APIs or whatever, and compute and storage is all converging, and we're just managing this in one kind of holistic model?
Yeah, it is definitely moving in the direction of more of a holistic model. This is not the old, IT infrastructure, legacy IT infrastructure that required specialized people for storage versus compute and networking. There is some separation still in some of the larger organizations in terms of the specialties that infrastructure engineers have at our customers, but the idea is to make this as easy as possible to be able to deploy storage almost like an application and kind of attach to it and use it. You know, if you think about how we get deployed, it's very simple. We run on commodity servers, so we're not providing any custom hardware appliances. We can run on Intel, AMD, and soon ARM-based servers, and those servers, our software pools all of the storage across the cluster of servers, and application servers that are anywhere in the data center can attach to volumes within the storage cluster and get high performance block storage. So it's easy to deploy, it's easy to scale as the customer wants to scale the infrastructure, and you get at the same time low latency and all the data services you would expect, like compression and thin provisioning, and as well as high availability with RAID and replication. So the way we get deployed, the way we get managed, the way we can scale is very, very simple. And the idea is to have a holistic view of the entire cloud, both on the application side and on the storage side, and working on top of the existing network infrastructure.
Mm. Cam, do you think that people have fully appreciated the profound, I would argue, implications of NVMe and what that means to folks? Or, is this one of those technologies where everybody kind of takes advantage of it without realizing exactly how much it changed the way we think about storage?
That's a good question. NVMe as a technology has been around for a long time now. And any new technology like this or protocol like NVMe takes time to get adopted. But the whole idea with NVMe was to create a host control interface for storage that is designed for flash, not designed for hard drive, which was what was used in the past with SATA and SAS. So the initial introduction of NVMe was for direct attached SSDs. It was designed for flash, so it really made the most of the flash performance and latency that's available. And it took time for it to be really adopted and become the dominant interface for SSDs. It's really only been a few years that NVMe SSDs became the most popular form of SSDs, especially for enterprise and data centers. Then the next major improvement there was to think about how can we put all this high performance flash on the network and not have to only use direct attached storage, but be able to disaggregate storage from compute and get all the efficiencies that come with that, the flexibility to scale your storage and compute independently, and the ability to have much lower TCO infrastructure by having higher utilization of your infrastructure, and also providing centralized data services and high availability for that storage. So moving NVMe flash onto the network was how NVMe over Fabrics was born, initially with RDMA fabrics. And then the third major breakthrough here was the work that Lightbits did with our partners, was the introduction of NVMe over TCP, which really makes NVMe over Fabrics suitable for the cloud, because now you can run this protocol NVMe over Fabrics on top of existing network infrastructure, vanilla Ethernet TCP/IP, and be able to still get high performance, low latency, and disaggregated storage. So to answer your question, absolutely. I think NVMe is really allowed us to make the most of what's available with the flash, to express the full value of the flash to the application. And with NVMe over TCP, and then all the work that we've done, not just to introduce NVMe over TCP, but clustering for full scale out HA solution, intelligent flash management to reduce tail latencies and provide data services. Together with NVMe gives you a complete storage solution.
Do you think also the way that we build and run applications will be different in this regard? Will I see more software components maybe running closer to the storage rather than the compute because I want to run analytics directly on the block, but maybe the compute or the rest of the application is running on a traditional server somewhere? Is the way we need to think about the way applications are built and deployed changing?
Yeah, well, today we're seeing applications being developed and deployed in some of the common environments such as VMware and Kubernetes and OpenStack, and they are still disaggregated from the storage side. So the storage is providing high performance, low latency volumes, with Lightbits, and the application is sitting on application servers that are elsewhere in the infrastructure, and multiple tenants and multiple heterogeneous application environments can share the same storage cluster. Now, we have every once in a while, we hear about and we talk to some customers about the potential value of doing more computation on the storage itself, and particularly for some use cases such as for AI and machine learning and training. There are some advantages to doing that, and certainly in the Lightbits architecture, we're well suited to take advantage of that because you have all the storage across a number of storage servers that also have computational horsepower that can be used for some of that computational storage model. As of today, we're not seeing a large market opportunity there, but certainly over time that could change. And I'm specifically talking about the use cases that Lightbits is focused on, which are, again, low latency database applications and also performance sensitive analytic workloads that would like a more general purpose, high performance block storage service.
All right, cool. Well, you heard it here first, guys. Storage is cool again. Just a question of how we're going to use it. Cam, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Paul Georgi, who's Director of Sales Engineering for XM Cyber, and they just bought Cyber Observer, which Paul is going to explain to us exactly how these two coming together equals 2 + 2 equals something like 8+, right, Paul? All right.
Something like that.
Paul, walk us through. What's the driver for the merger? What's going on?
Yeah, so XM Cyber, we do what's called attack path management. It's this idea of being able to figure out how an attacker's campaign looks, starting from a breach point and then compromising critical assets. So we're showing how an attacker could leverage misconfigurations and user behaviors and leveraging things like vulnerabilities to get to compromise critical assets. So a really common question from our customers is saying, hey, you're showing me all these misconfigurations and vulnerabilities and how an attacker could string them together, and these 4 steps lead to this compromise of this critical asset, but I have security controls. I've spent all this money on my EDR solution and my microsegmentation tools and my privileged access management solution. So there's all these security controls that they keep dumping money into with the hopes of kind of, hey, we aren't fixing the problem, but it's enough of a remediation so it's not as much of a risk to us. The problem with what we were doing is we didn't have any way to weigh the risk, saying that, hey, this one attack path looks really bad, but we weren't really considering that, hey, you have 6 of these really strong controls configured really securely that would probably never make it so that would happen. We just never really assessed that. Cyber Observer, what their whole world is they integrate from an API perspective with security controls and make sure that they're configured. So now what we can do is through these attack paths, weight them, saying that this one seems like it's more complex, but this one's actually the one that should be affecting you the most because it is something that you don't have any security controls tied to, or this one's really easy, but you have a lot of security controls preventing it from happening. So now our attack path management is going to be security control aware, making sure that those security controls are configured in the right way to prevent the stuff that we're showing could happen doesn't ever happen. So that's the main goal, which I'm really excited about because, like I said, a lot of customers are saying, yes, that's a really relevant attack path, but look at all this money I've thrown in my security controls. And I really wish that you would throw that into the equation of saying, is this likely to happen? That makes sense?
Right. It does. And do you think that a lot of times when people are ascribing things to be false positives, what they're really after is saying, hey, a lot of the things we're getting just lack the context or just not relevant. So it's not necessarily that there isn't an issue. It's just that they're basically saying it didn't matter to us. So do we need a little more granularity into our viewpoints of what exactly is a security threat? Because otherwise I feel like, we just throw spreadsheets at people and they rebel.
Yeah, I think that you look at legacy risk-based assessment, risk-based management. There has been a lot of those. Hey, here's a list of 1 million things. Go ahead and deal with it. And that's really what we're trying to do with attack path management. But the focus has always been to give a perspective that an attacker has in the environment. And our perspective always was correlating misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, and users' behavior to see what could happen from an attacker standpoint. But now we have a whole other component into that equation, like you're talking about, being able to correlate, to be able to say, hey, but you have these security controls, so this is something you need to be more aware of, or this is an attack path that is not really ever something that's going to actually affect you because of the way you have your security controls configured.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's more misconfigurations than ever, but that just may be me. Do you think that that's a function of we just have so many more things out there, or is there something else going on?
So I completely agree with you. The misconfigurations, I think, is our world of SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS and cloud adoption, because there isn't as many vulnerabilities in the world of AWS. It's like, hey, my EC2 instance, and I've got all my things configured. Yes, there are vulnerabilities within operating systems and applications within it, but you think about like, this user role that has rights to this EC2 instance can be misconfigured to allow yourself to do things like privilege escalation. So there's a whole other bucket of variables that we didn't really have to worry about 10, 15 years ago, because misconfigurations were usually things relegated to, hey, you've got a misconfigured permission. That was usually the misconfiguration. Or, hey, RDP is enabled, but you don't have network layer authentication, NLA enabled on it. So you should have that turned on. Well, now we have this whole other world of SaaS and PaaS and IaaS solutions that have a bunch of just nothing but configuration, and we have a lot of newbies in the space, and not talking about newbies being a bad thing, but in the world that we're living in, there aren't any 20-year cybersecurity professionals that have experience within AWS. Like, they just don't exist, because 20 years ago, no one was really doing security in AWS. That wasn't something we need to worry about. So now we have not a lot of familiarity, not a lot of talent, and then millions and millions of configurations, where sometimes just one small one really is the difference between you getting compromised and being completely secure. So now being aware of that is a big thing when it comes to the world of misconfigurations.
Mm-hmm. What's your sense of, is observability coming to cybersecurity? We talk a lot about observability in the sense of DevOps and maybe even DevSecOps, but is that now shifting to the security side of the house, who wants to also be able to see what's going on?
Yeah, I think that the world from the security side has gotten bigger as we're tying things into DevOps. You look at like CI/CD pipelines and security controls getting built within those pipelines. That's an area that we really didn't ever have to play with before. Most of the time, security teams are really relegated to maybe some web application scanning, maybe a little bit of like source code scanning, like, hey, we're going to detect SQL injection in the source code and then make you aware of it before it actually gets to post. But now we're tying into these pipelines, and we're able to stop the deployment of code to production because of things that are not aligning with the way the security team should be working. We're saying, hey, there's a vulnerability that is in this open source module. There's a vulnerability in this code. We're going to not allow that to get into the Docker. So I think overall, the security team's visibility or observability has gotten a lot bigger. So yeah, there's a lot of other things to really for the security teams to be aware of and check that really weren't within the scope of security before.
We talk a lot about shift left these days. How automated do you think all this will get? And do we need the shift left, or can we automate things to the point where developers can just focus on their code and they don't need to be cybersecurity experts?
Yeah, I've had a mantra. There was a friend of mine about 10 years ago who said one thing to me, and it stuck with me. He says, if it's not automated, it's broken. I think that we've now continued to see that that's the world that we have to live in. I mean, we just don't have enough cybersecurity professionals to investigate everything. There's not a lot of ability for us to carry out playbooks the way that we need to. Correlation of different events, and even the development and security from like a proactive approach is something that we just have to have automated. So yeah, I think that we're seeing that starting to take off. You look at like security orchestration platforms that are starting to get a little bit more traction. You're seeing this shift away from legacy investigations within like SIM platforms and really tying into this whole response around, hey, this was this type of events, we run this playbook, and all of that be automated in a sense that there was thought into every single step that needs to play out. It's put together in a way that's automated, and all these things are happening at a really fast pace. And so now these analysts are just providing input on how to do the playbooks, and then then monitoring as the playbooks are happening. So yeah, there's definitely a shift to be able to have it more automated, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I would continue to say it again, and it's never more relevant today than it was 10 years ago. If it's not automated, it's broken.
Mm-hmm. Do you think AI will play a role in all this in the future, and what is that going to look like?
Man, that's the $1 million question. I hate using the term AI and machine learning. I think like there's so many people who are like, oh, he said AI. All right, like another marketing buzzword. I just was at RSA a couple weeks ago, and it would be fun to walk around the vendor booths and see how many times you hear AI and machine learning. We all know that it's the manifest destiny of security. Like, yes, we would love that to be to play a role in it. I think we've still got a few more years before that actually plays into everything. I think that most commonly we're going to have to leverage like supervised machine learning to start like getting all of the analysts' feedback and decision making, and then train these machine models to say like, hey, if this happens, this is our response, and then this type of response happens from that, then we have to shift and then be able to accommodate this new strategy. So I think, yeah, it's going to eventually be here, but I still think we got a few more years before we actually start using the term AI within attack path management. For right now, I think overall attack path management and within the world of like what Cyber Observer is doing to complement it is just giving the both red and the blue teams insight into attackers playing out within kind of their perspective, and how we're going to leverage that within AI. I mean, there's a ton of ways that I could speculate, but overall, I think that we still have a few more years before attack path management gets the AI-ified, if that's a term.
Do you think that we don't spend enough time thinking about things from the perspective of the attacker, and that all our focus is kind of on that, let's defend the perimeter per se, but we're not really thinking through the way an attacker would think about things?
Yeah, there's a guy over at Microsoft, his name's John Lambert, and he has an awesome quote. I like to refer to it when I'm thinking about kind of your question. It's this idea, or the way he says it, I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly, but he says something along the lines of defenders think in lists and attackers think in graphs. And until we start thinking the way defenders are thinking, we're always going to lose. And I think that dials down into the core root of the problem that we're starting to see, where we've been generating millions and millions of or lists with millions and millions of lines of these are the vulnerabilities you need to fix, with this myopic view around, hey, log4shell or spring4shell and log4j and Felina that just came out a few weeks ago. I have to patch it, without really any awareness of how an attacker would operationalize that vulnerability, then also correlate it with some sort of other misconfiguration or vulnerability or just a problem within security, and then be able to use both of those two together to compromise critical assets. So yeah, I think we have to shift the way that we're thinking and start looking at things the way an attacker would. And that isn't in the form of a vulnerability list. That isn't in the form of a CSPM tool and whether or not I'm PCI compliant. Like, these things are really important, but overall there's this perspective of how an attacker thinks that we really aren't considering. And I think that that's definitely something that needs to change for us to really be secure and really get the benefit of all the tools that we're using, all the effort and making sure things are secure, and just making sure that we're staying up with the world that we live in. If you think about like Felina that just came out a few weeks ago, being able to say how many machines are vulnerable is one thing, and that's old world thinking. That's the list that I'm talking about. But if you look at it the way attackers looking at it, is like, how can I use this vulnerability to be able to carry out an extra step in a campaign that I couldn't carry out yesterday? And that's the operationalize. Oh man, I'm trying to make a crazy word. The operationalizing a new vulnerability within a bigger campaign and assessing the risk and assessing how that new variable in that larger equation is impacted by that new variable. And so being able to say, hey, Felina came out. Yes, we have these machines, but this is the risk to me, and this is the risk to my critical assets. And that's something that I think that most organizations aren't doing for the most part today, and I think would have a huge impact in just assessment of risk, understanding vulnerabilities in the landscape, understanding how secure their critical assets are. Fortunately, most organizations only get that perspective when they're dealing with some sort of issue. When there is a real ransomware campaign, when there is some sort of data breach, then you look at this and go like, man, it was only 3 steps to compromise my critical assets. And it was this really basic one correlated with this really other basic one too. I wish I would have known that before. And if you talk to anybody who's dealt with one of those big breaches, the term "I wish I would have known that" or "I wish I would have" comes up all the time, and we're giving that perspective. So you never have that situation of "I wish I would have known that" or "I wish I would have done that," because you now have that that perspective before it becomes a problem.
Well, what is that one thing that you wish people would know before they got started so that you didn't have to constantly answer the same question over and over again?
If I had that one answer, if the answer was just 42 or whatever the answer is to that big question, then we would all be out of a job. Like in every environment, it's different, and everybody struggles with different things. In our solution, we have, remember those 3 buckets I was talking about, the misconfigurations, the vulnerabilities, and user behavior. On the main dashboard, it shows you what your main problems are in the environment. And I mean, I have a lot of perspective in a lot of different tenets of ours and the different environments. And it's different in every single one. Some organizations are really good at patching and there's not a lot of vulnerabilities. Some are really, really bad at just basic configuration. Things like local passwords and cached credentials and just AWS access keys sitting on people's desktops and SSH keys that don't have passphrases on it that are just accessible for anybody to take that then expose a 5,000 node Kubernetes farm. Like there's stuff like that. So every environment's a little different, but if you get that perspective of, okay, I wish I would have known, and if I can look at these are the things most impacting me, at least you're doing that due diligence of assessing kind of what the environment looks like, what is the most riskiest entities in my environment, and what are the most likely attack paths, and doing something about it before it becomes a problem is a discipline that I wish that more people would adhere to.
All right. It's a combination of art and science. Hey, Paul, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of TechstrongTV. We had some great interviews with Alan at RSA and KubeCon Cloud Native Con, as well as part 2 of an exciting episode of The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones. We also had a special RSAC edition of CISO Talk, in which Alan and Mitch were joined by some brilliant guests to talk about the changing role of CISOs. Finally, we had 2 episodes of View with Vizard, as well as an interview with Charlene at RSA. We'll be back on Thursday, so please join us for that. Once again, thanks for joining, and we hope to see you again.